Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became the next Soul Hunter Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 from AO3. So let's start the video. Welcome to the remake of Madness Unleashed. It's going to take some time, but bear with me. Enjoy! 3-star Meister Maka Alburn searched the frigid ghost town with cautious emerald eyes, condensation puffs billowing in the Arctic air of Innopolis, Russia. Lord Death, had sent the experienced Meister and weapon duo to investigate rumors of a precaution going around siphoning innocent souls from townsfolk. Fear spread quickly through the small village as the death count began to grow, many rushing to safety by crossing the Volga River to a small peninsula called Tatarstan. The small town of less than 100 people had already dwindled down to nearly half due to the killer's aggressive behavior. Houses were in shambles due to the 𝗓𝗫 destroying them in order to retrieve its victims, ripping heavy tiles and thick layers of thatch off with minimal effort. Rubble lined the powder-coated streets, yet heavy snowfall had all but covered the destructive trails. In the mission file, the information provided was hardly any help to Maka. The only known clues were horror stories created by the terrified townspeople, their fear and anxiety causing inaccurate facts. Some claimed it was a monster that stood nearly 7 foot tall, while others claimed the creature was as short as 3 foot with a hunched back and equally long talons. One old man even claimed the creature had the torso of a woman with the head of a goat and the lower half of a snake, though that sounded more like a mythology reference than an accurate 𝗓𝗫 description. "You sense anything, Maka?" Soul's voice reverberated loudly in the silence, his face appearing in the scythe's blade. The cold bit at his face even in weapon form, red tinting it bright. "It's cold as hell here. Let's hurry up and get this over with before I start losing fingers. There's nothing out here yet. You know we can't leave until it's found, Soul. Suck it up for a while longer." Maka shook her head as she slowly expanded her soul perception to cover a larger area, eyes closing to concentrate. There was nothing for miles except a few wild animals taking shelter from the Arctic winter. She could sense the owner of the inn they were staying at along with what few townspeople were left. Even with a heavy coat, earmuffs, gloves, and multiple layers on, Maka could still feel the stinging cold creeping into her bones. Clenched fingers were going numb, even after being outside for a mere few minutes. It was so cold. Even her soul was beginning to shake slightly from the harsh conditions. Soul was right. Staying out here for much longer would do more harm than good. But until that 𝗓𝗫 was found and destroyed, Maka Alburn would camp outside overnight if she had to. There's nothing around for miles. Just some wildlife and the villagers. Even if I stood here for a while longer, I'm sure the cold would take me before a would-be 𝗓𝗫 could. Let's head back to the inn for now before we freeze to death. Maybe someone at the front desk will have more information, and a hot cup of tea. Heavy boots crunched crisply against the freshly falling snow as Maka trudged through the shifting loose powder, the layers beneath already compacted and frozen solid. The dead of winter in Russia usually resulted in impressive levels of wintry mix and harsh winds, mercilessly taking those who wandered into Mother Nature's deadly hands. A violent chill raced up her spine, and Maka felt both rows of teeth clattering loudly in the still air. Signs of hypothermia were beginning to show, quickly sapping what energy she had left. Even Soul was freezing in his scythe form, the shaft of the blade like ice against gloved hands. If he didn't lose his fingers first, she would. "Even if the 𝗓𝗫 shows up, there's no way we can fight in this weather. We'd have to return to the inn so we don't freeze to death. I'm not sure if even the black blood can withstand this." Soul sniffled loudly before letting out a loud sneeze. "Damn cold. Damn being a naked weapon. Damn Russian 𝗓𝗫." Maka agreed, her mind preoccupied elsewhere. An unsettled feeling was pooling in the pit of her stomach. Ongoing attacks, and now the creature was nowhere to be seen? It didn't bode well with the blonde. The inn was getting closer into view as thick smoke billowing from the double chimney stack protruded above the heavily snow-packed roof. Out of all the buildings remaining in the town, the inn was the strongest one. Every wall and floor had been reinforced with dual insulation and thicker materials in attempt to retain what little heat it could during the brutal season. It was a quaint two-story brick cottage with a mere 10 rooms throughout the whole building. Out back was a now-buried garden that provided guests with fresh produce and fruit, but for now they were surviving on food that had been canned before winter. For living in such harsh conditions a good chunk of the year, the people of 𝗵𝗲 certainly honed their survival skills. Meister and Weapon were fortunate enough to get a room close to the boiler. Thankfully, not even a draft of cold air entered the domain. Most places assumed they were a couple, and some desk attendants had offered to put them up in the romantic suite. 𝗧𝗏 would break out in a hearty laugh while 𝗏𝗃 turned bright red and 𝗏𝗃 chopped, said Weapon over the head. The two may have been together for nearly 5 years, but it was strictly a Meister/Weapon relationship, completely platonic. Even 𝗬𝗏𝗏 seemed slightly surprised, seeing as they were the most tightly knit team in the land. Being together was a ridiculous notion that had 𝗏𝗃 scoffing whenever brought up by younger students or people complimenting the two, saying they looked adorable together. A few had even asked if they were married, and one elderly woman asked if they were planning on having children. Both turned bright red at the more daring remarks, their connected wavelengths betraying their true emotions to one another for a brief second before becoming sealed away once more. Sure, they had innocently slept together on certain instances, but the two always respected each other's privacy and personal space when sharing a bed, though 𝗧𝗏 tended to flop around in his sleep and sometimes ended on top of the Meister. Mostly it happened after a big battle and they were too tired to go to their separate rooms, opting for the closest piece of furniture to collapse on. The thought of them actually dating had 𝗏𝗃 turning a heavy shade of pink, if possible, under her already red wind-chilled face. Now that she was older, nearly 18 now, and puberty had kicked it up to high gear, the Meister had become nothing short of stunning. Her slim legs had become elongated and toned from years of training and missions, slender arms matching. A few inches had been added to her height while her hips had become fuller and shapelier. Her sandy blonde hair had grown out more as well, though the pigtails seemed to stay and flowed down to nearly mid-back. Blazing green eyes finally complemented a now slimmer face. Lips became plumper and tinted to the perfect hue of salmon. Even her chest had filled out to the next cup size, catching the eyes of younger 𝗔𝗵𝗻 students. Some brave or stupid, depending on how you saw it, even came right up to the Meister and asked her out or asked to be their Meister. 𝗧𝗏 usually ignored the fanboys, though intervened a few times when some of them couldn't take the hint. One even went so far as to stalk the Meister on her way home and ambush her in an alley. Poor kid was hospitalized for 3 weeks once 𝗧𝗏 and Black Star got a hold of him after 𝗏𝗃 took a few chops. As flattering as it was, there was only one man she cared for in her life, and he. A sudden zing reached her ears, and with a sloppy dodge, 𝗏𝗃 narrowly avoided having her throat sliced clean open by a flying object. Shifting quickly, the Meister turned to her left, calculating the direction the weapon flew from. She'd gotten so absorbed in her thoughts that she failed to sense the incoming 𝗧𝗏 wavelength. Damn it. Clenching her jaw down, she spread her legs to a defensive from, gripping the side shaft harder. 𝗏𝗃, are you alright? 𝗧𝗏 called out to her, worry etched into his voice. I'm fine, it didn't even hit me. Where did that come from? Damn it, I wasn't paying attention, it's my fault. You're bleeding. I'd say that wasn't a full miss. Besides, I didn't notice him either, so we're both at fault. It's possible it can conceal its presence, so keep your guard up. I'll worry about it later, it's just a scratch. We've got bigger issues to handle now. 𝗏𝗃 ground out as another blur shot by, this one taking a few strands of hair as she jerked her head back. It was fast and precise. There. Let's go, 𝗧𝗏. Shooting towards the direction of the attack, 𝗏𝗃 felt her soul automatically connecting with her partner, sparks flying between them as they began to merge with ease. Soul resonance. The souls merged into one, power bursting forth from within as Meister and Weapon became one. 𝗧𝗏 began to morph, his death scythe form glowing and expanding as 𝗏𝗃 charged towards a small, abandoned hut settled behind some rundown houses. A heavy push from her legs had the Meister airborne, scythe swung high above as she closed in on the target. A flash of light sparkled briefly in the shattered 4-panel window as a ninja star came flying out, clipping 𝗏𝗃 above her left eye. Demon Hunter. The hut exploded violently on contact and stirred up a large amount of powder, whiting out the surrounding area. Soul perception triggered and 𝗏𝗃 narrowly dodged a kunai aimed for her neck. Balancing Soul in the snow, the Meister grabbed hold of the shaft before spinning and roundhousing towards the concealed target. Her foot made contact and the assailant went flying backwards through the snow. Pressing forward, 𝗏𝗲 charged after the soul's wavelength, swinging and slicing the massive scythe with ease. Whoever was attacking had skills to say the least. Barely any of the attacks landed, and if they did, it was a shallow slice. His attacks remind me of Black Star. Be careful, 𝗏𝗲, he's someone with experience in ninja arts. Soul warned as he blocked a dangerously sharp blade from slicing 𝗏𝗲's arm clean off. 𝗏𝗲 grunted as she pushed hard against the ground, yelling as she put all of her weight against the attacker to throw him back. Maybe Black Star could get some stealth lessons from this guy if he lives through all this. 𝗏𝗲 caught a foot to the stomach and gasped as the air purged her lungs, pain radiating throughout the torso as she slid back through the snow. A hard hit. Just not hard enough to take her out. This guy is taking advantage of the snow, so why don't we just clear it out? Bracing the scythe in both hands, 𝗏𝗲 began to spin it, faster and faster until it reached the point of becoming a blur as a powerful wind force kicked up. The light powder blew away in an instant, clearing a good few inches from the ground as well. Left in its place was an empty space with clear visibility of the entire area, the enemy no longer in front of them. A slight shift in the breeze told 𝗏𝗲 exactly where he was, and she pivoted on her foot, Soul still spinning rapidly as a sneak attack was deflected from behind. The attacker skidded across the ground, katana in hand, while the other supported his crouched form. Non-traditional white ninja armor cloaked his body from head to toe. The only visible detail was the piercing blue eyes peeking through his face mask. "You, students of 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐵, I am not your intended target, but this shall be an interesting fight." A masculine voice mused into the air as the ninja vanished. Even with soul perception and her instincts, 𝗏𝗲 was forced to be on the defensive, constantly blocking while her attacker became faster with each strike. The frozen tundra was rapidly sapping her energy. They needed to get out and fast. Soul could feel her strength waning and clenched his jaw tightly with a growl. 𝗏𝗲 couldn't hold up this level of fighting for more than a few more minutes. Her slower movements were causing the blade to slip through her defenses and slice porcelain skin wide open like rice paper. "It seems you're struggling, Soul. You can always count on me." A familiar red demon cooed from within Soul. The weapon grunted as another heavy kick was directed at 𝗏𝗏, the scythe taking the brunt of the force. Damn demon always tried to play hero at the last moment, yearning for a chance to break free from his clinking restraints. "I don't need your deceiving hand, demon. Once we get an opening, we'll strike and finish this. Besides, we made a pact to restrict the black blood unless absolutely necessary. Unless you'd like to have a visit from 𝗏𝗏?" Soul gave a toothy grin as he felt the demon get nervous. For a scrawny imp, he sure was afraid of a single girl and her hardback books. That was one of the only things keeping him in line for the most part, though he still tried to open the door in lapses of strength and will. "Just remember the offer is there, Soul, if you decide to change your mind." The demon fell silent, and Soul gave a sigh of relief. He didn't need the maddening effects of black blood. This was just like any other 3-star mission. They could handle it, that he was sure of. "You are a very skilled meister, 𝗏𝗏 𝗓𝗏, wielder of Death Scythe Soul Eater Evans. But you know nothing of this environment in which I was born, raised, and trained. If you cannot even hold up against a master ninja, how do you expect to defeat a newly reborn 𝐒𝐭𝐲?" The mysterious master ninja mocked as he landed softly atop the roof of an abandoned house, his movements seemingly noiseless. 𝗏𝗏 panted heavily with both hands on trembling knees, body aching painfully. A cut on her forehead began to profusely bleed, and a hand hastily wiped it from her eye, the sweat intermingling with the blood and stinging mildly. "So, tell me, why would a ninja coincidentally be in the same area as a pre-𝐒𝐭𝐲 sighting? Seems a little odd to me, seeing as you were the one to attack first." With a deep breath in and out, 𝗏𝗏 stood tall and planted her scythe into the thick snow. "This wouldn't be the end, that she'd make sure of. Unless you're out here as a distraction so whoever you're working for can hunt down the suspect and unleash a full 𝐒𝐭𝐲. Am I right?" The man let out a low whistle and began to slowly clap, slightly impressed with her observations. His arrogance struck a nerve within. "I read that you were a smart one, very perceptive of you. But unfortunately, not completely correct. My mission was not merely to distract you, but to test your skill set. I have heard of your battles against the 𝐒𝐭𝐲 𝐒𝐻𝑒, but he was an ancient artifact compared to modern 𝐒𝐭𝐲. Simply punching a 𝐒𝐭𝐲 in the face will not suffice in taking them down, no matter how well it worked last time. But if this is all you have to offer, I'm afraid you'll have no hope in defeating the next 𝐒𝐭𝐲 about to be unleashed upon the world. Maka glared at the man, anger pooling in the pit of her stomach as she placed her fingers together and stretched them. Neck stretching followed next, her eyes never leaving her target. With a final shoulder roll, the meister was ready. Grasping 𝗀𝗏 in her hand, the meister whirled him around with ease, stopping with him placed behind her, ready to swing. No one made a mockery of Maka 𝗷𝗵𝗄, the last death scythe wielder in the world. Unease wavered through the wavelength, though quickly became concealed on 𝗀𝗏's end. I don't care who or what you are, but you've made the mistake of attacking us without reason. 𝗀𝗏, get ready. Maka, are you sure about this? Maybe it would be better to retreat for now. Your body can't handle the frigid weather when you're exhausted and losing blood. I don't think. 𝗀𝗏 now. Maka grit out as she crouched down, preparing for an attack. 𝗀𝗏 faltered before steeling his will and readying himself. If she was still willing to fight in unfavorable conditions, so would he. Until their very last breaths. A bit demanding, are we? You should listen to what your partner says. It may be what saves your life. You have already reached your limitations, Maka 𝗷𝗵𝗄. The figure gracefully stood to his full height, waiting with barely bated breath for the oncoming attack. Kunai slid from both sleeves to his waiting hands, their gleam menacing against the stark wintry mix. I see she still has some sense left in her. The demon snickered as he watched 𝗀𝗏 enter the familiar piano room. He merely shrugged off the death glare from the weapon before seating himself across the room, becoming comfortable for the show that was about to begin. I suggest you keep your mouth shut, demon, before I shut it myself. 𝗀𝗏 growled as he loosened the constraining tie around his neck while glancing over the familiar black and red piano room. His pinstriped suit wasn't the most comfortable article of clothing, but seeing as it was a special occasion, he'd make do with it for a while. Maka, this is a stupid idea that won't end well. Your stubbornness isn't cool. Well, 𝗀𝗏, then we'll just have to see this stupid idea to the finish, now won't we? Besides, you should be used to my stubbornness after all these years. Maka appeared from the shadows of the room, fingers intertwined at her front like always. 𝗀𝗏 turned to glance at her and froze, his heart skipping a beat as he took her in with slightly widened eyes. The flowing black dress was a tighter fit than usual as Maka's curves were on full display, accentuating every part of her body perfectly. Intricate lace gloves had replaced the simple ones from many years ago, tracing all the way up to her shoulders before dipping down to the top swell of her breasts. Solid fabric cascaded down from there, fitting snugly against her like a second skin. Once it reached her hips, the flowing fabric flared out into a simple high-low skirt which showed off her lean and toned legs, the black 3-inch heels drawing even more attention to them. Her hair had been loosely tied up in a relaxed updo with 2 tendrils of hair framing either side of her face, enhancing her angelic-like features. Yeah, I'll lead. 𝗀𝗏 stuttered lamely, mentally slapping himself across the face. Smooth, Evans, real smooth. If Maka noticed, she didn't say anything. The demon snickered behind his hand, mischievous eyes dancing. Making a mental note to strangle the imp later on, the weapon turned his attention towards his meister. He was pretty sure she could feel his heart nearly bursting through a scarred chest as he took a gloved hand and bowed, gently placing a kiss against the knuckles. Though judging from her reddened expression, she was in a similar situation herself. A zinging shiver shot down 𝗀𝗏's spine, and he swallowed hard to compose himself as she slid a hand delicately against his shoulder. What was wrong with him? She'd never triggered such strong emotional reactions like this before, so why now? Let's go. Maka shouted as she launched towards her opponent with fiery determination and drive, Demon Hunter glowing and morphing once more. Genie Hunter. 𝗀𝗏 began to swing to the music emitting from the demon's music box, his hand comfortably resting on Maka's waist as he led the dance. They'd both changed so much over the past few years that it nearly seemed like they were different people. 𝗀𝗏 was nearly surpassing 6 foot tall while Maka was close behind at around 5'7". Their bodies had gone through other transformations as well, not just height-wise. While Maka had gotten some curves and filled out more, Soul's shoulders had broadened, and his body had become leaner and more muscular. His spiky white hair stayed nearly identical to when they first met, save for the occasional black headband worn to tame the wild mane from time to time. While a beard had attempted to grow, the weapon kept it shaved down as, quote, "Stubble isn't cool." "Soul, you're acting a little weird today. Is everything alright?" Those large emerald eyes he adored so much locked with his own piercing crimson, searching for any concealed emotions. She always knew right away when something was bothering him, her soul perception strong as ever. But it wasn't always just that. They'd grown to know everything about each other, including concealed emotional cues. Both Weapon and Meister had weaved ever tight, not just physically. After battling the 𝐒𝐻𝐻, their soul wavelengths had perfectly fused as if made for one another. Their thoughts and feelings could easily be spread through soul connection alone, sometimes accidentally. Maka mostly kept a tight lock on hers most of the time, and not even Soul could break through it. On the occasion that she slipped and let down her guard, though, she had some interesting thoughts and feelings hidden beneath the iron mask. "Apart from you being stubborn as usual, Maka, I'm fine, so don't worry. Being controlled by the black blood is just so uncool." Soul couldn't help the goofy grin that adorned his face as his partner slipped into a relaxed smile. The demon felt the madness boil inside, and he could barely contain himself with glee. With two crooked fingers he snapped, triggering the black blood's madness. With a single fluid movement, she spun away from him, arm outstretched before he gently pulled her back. The distance between them closed, and a spark shot between them as their skin touched. Maka wrapped her arms around his neck, resting her forehead against his as they swayed. It was moments like this that made it nearly impossible to resist her touch, and without hesitation, Soul wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her tight against him as red and green eyes locked. Jab, 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 foot sweep, jab, jab, block, deflect, swing. Maka charged the attacker without break, her attacks stronger and faster than before with the black blood activated. The man seemed thoroughly surprised when she came face to face with him in a matter of seconds, scythe already slicing through the air. He ducked down at the last possible second, barely avoiding the scythe's scorching touch mere centimeters from his nose. There was no time to strike back. It was his turn to be on the defensive. He'd heard a little information regarding black blood from Russian and Death City newspaper snippets, but seeing it up close and personal was an entirely different experience. Even with his decades of training and dedication to the ninja arts, he was struggling to avoid being sliced in half. An opportunity opened, and he flung his kunai as hard as he could towards the Meister, hoping it would be enough of a distraction for him to get back on the offensive side. The kunai hit their target. One sunk into Maka's upper abdomen while the other punctured the center of her chest. The Meister looked down at the weapons half embedded within her before snapping her narrowed gaze back to her attacker. Thick ooze boiled out around her wounds as the black blood pushed the kunai blades out before sewing the wounds shut in moments. If not for the sheer strength of the poison swirling within, Maka would have succumbed to injury within moments. A cocky grin tilted her lips. "I must say, Miss 𝗨𝗵𝗲, that is a very impressive skill to possess." Although, the ninja straightened himself up, a hand reaching into a small pouch on his left hip. "There is a weakness to every secret weapon, and unfortunately for you, I am well aware of what yours is." His hand whipped out of the bag and 5 small metal balls hurtled towards Maka. With his other hand, he quickly muttered a small jutsu before launching at the Meister, arm drawn back as lightning engulfed his fist. The small metal balls exploded in her face, leaving a thick smoke clinging to her body. Figure 6 Hunter. "It seems you've duped me, Miss 𝗨𝗵𝗲. Well played. Damn anti-demon wavelength." The imp jumped down from his plush chair and walked towards the back corner of the room, losing interest in the madness-free environment. Soul only sent him a cocky grin over his shoulder. "We've played your game long enough to know how to beat the madness. Doesn't hurt when you have the coolest partner either." Maka blushed furiously before smacking Soul on the arm, embarrassment and pride shining through her eyes. The blonde nearly stomped his foot out of habit, though withheld on the violent, reactive gesture. "I idiot. Don't say such embarrassing things." "How is it embarrassing if it's true?" "Maka 𝗨𝗵𝗲, coolest partner ever. Not as cool as me, though. No one could top me." Maka pulled away from his embrace and started smacking him on the arms and chest, face burning deep red. 𝗏 just laughed heartily, further irritating his meister and increasing the intensity of the hits. After a few dozen smacks, it was beginning to hurt, so he pushed her to arm's length. Idiot, 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 idiot. Fine, I'll stop. 𝗏 caved before she could pull a Maka chop on him. He grabbed her wrists to stop the barrage. She didn't fight it as she looked up at him, eyes showing amusement, embarrassment, and something else, something that 𝗏 hadn't seen before. Maka gently pushed her hands forward until they were resting against his chest, biting her lower lip gently, and looking away with obvious turbulent thoughts. Maka? 𝗏 released her wrists and delicately tilted her face up his hand. Light as a feather, he brushed her bangs away from her eyes, locking gazes with his meister. It was rare to see a vulnerable side to the feisty wielder, the action causing immediate concern. Her thoughts were still heavily blocked off. What's wrong? It felt like her heart was going to burst looking at his face. He was concerned, but it was in such a loving and tender way that the meister couldn't help herself. If she didn't do it now, she would chicken out and not have another chance to express her feelings. Maybe it was the cold affecting her mind, or even the fact that this fight was leaning towards a certain fatality. Regardless of the reason, Maka steeled the wavering resolve. Placing her hands on either side of his face, she stood on her toes and placed a soft kiss against his cheek with tears in her eyes and flushed cheeks. An audible gasp slipped from his slack jaw, though his body remained rigid in place. Not even the coolest kid in Death City could anticipate such a move. Thank you, 𝗏, for everything. Truly. He was tiring. The woman in front of him was a monster. They'd been going non-stop for a good while now, jumping from building to building, and she had yet to slow down even a hair. In fact, it almost seemed like she was speeding up. Weapon supplies were running low, and all that was left was his trusted katana passed down through generations of legendary trainers and warriors. It appeared to be a normal sword, but only those who were blessed to be able to use it knew what otherworldly power it held within it. Using it meant there was a high chance it would be a critical, if not fatal blow, depending on where it landed. It wasn't his intention to kill the meister, but desperate times called for desperate measures if he was going to make it out alive. Now he understood why 𝗬𝗓𝗓 was the highest-ranking school for meisters and weapons. Their reputation precedes them. I suggest you stop now if you wish to survive this battle. This could be a fatal blow if I am forced to use it. Maka either didn't hear the warning or didn't care as she swung the figure 6 hunter at the ninja, eyes ablaze with determination. As he slid the katana from his sheath, a massive explosion shook the earth, both of them faltering in their stances. Birds shot from the trees to seek shelter elsewhere. Wildlife fled as fast as they could run. The ruins shuddered violently, even collapsing a few perilously teetering houses into thunderous heaps. What the hell was that? 𝗏 yelled out as another explosion triggered closer. One after another they went off, getting closer and closer to the fighting duo. Maka felt the familiar sensation streak across her mind, and she skid to a halt, head snapping towards the center of the explosions. It was large, and headed right towards them. The 𝐒𝐭𝐴, it's here. You're telling me an ancient lineage of master ninjas are hiding in the frozen mountains of Russia? Seriously? Tell me you're joking. Liz gawked at the stack of papers handed to her by Kid, flipping through them before settling on waving them around in disbelief. Patty had a copy of the report as well, but was busy making a small army of giraffes instead. Kid was sitting on a high-backed throne centered in the death room, elbows resting on his knees while he sat deep in thought. I wish that were the case, but unfortunately it isn't a joke. Maka and 𝗏 are not too far from that area currently. Assuming their mission goes well, it may be wise to send them to investigate this. Black Star and 𝗬𝗵𝗲 are deployed on a mission as well. They won't be back anytime soon. Kid explained before shifting his weight forward to a stand. Hands symmetrically brushed the invisible lint from his Reaper cloak. I would normally investigate this myself, but seeing his father is gone, there's no one left to keep an eye on the school in Death City. The world isn't safe just because 𝗓𝗓 is dead. We understand, Kid. I know what you're going through is tough. The students and citizens of Death City need you to take the reins and settle things down. Maybe then you'll be free to continue missions. Liz assured with a small smile. Kid partially returned it, too perturbed to keep it up. Then it slipped into a strained frown. Patty had amassed a large army of paper giraffes around her, a smile on her face as she observed her handiwork. It quickly turned devilish, and the weapon-full body tackled the sea of defenseless origami. Kid felt his eye twitch as tiny animals bounced off his face as the massacre began. Every single day. Agreed. For now, I'll help guide the 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐴 students and faculty to fulfill their dreams and unleash their. Patty, will you at least throw them symmetrically? They're bouncing off my head in random order. I can't tolerate it. Liz groaned and went back to reading the mission specs as Patty bombarded Kid with paper giraffes, his screams of displeasure filling the spacious death room. It seemed lately that any requests coming in were sightings of precautions all over the world. Black Star was on one in Egypt, 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗲 were on another in Russia, 𝗧𝗏𝗃 and Harvard were sent to Greenland. They were coming in tidal waves, and the 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐴 only had so many 2-star and 3-star meisters and weapons. Consideration had even gone into sending Professor Stein and Marie, but the duo had become a trio with their 3-year-old son Hiroaki. After what happened to Lord Death, Kid didn't have the heart to separate the parents from their child. Spirit had willingly offered his services as Death Scythe to the new Death Lord, but Kid had politely declined, keeping him on an as-needed basis. Liz and Patty were more than enough for him, but the Meister thanked him for the offer regardless. So, doing what he was infamous for, Spirit threw himself back into the lovely waiting arms of the 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐴 ladies. Though according to Blair, he would often suddenly grow sullen, his eyes glassing over with no warning as he stared off into the distance. The war had a deeper effect on those directly involved. Patty, give me those giraffes. Come and get 'em. Wee. Giraffe cyclone. Liz did her best to ignore the flurry of origami everywhere, a few bouncing harmlessly off her head in the process. Poor Kid was buried beneath a mountain of the tiny things. A sentence within the mission spec caught her eye and she backtracked, pointing a delicately painted nail to the sentence, tapping against the words as she read. Even the weapon felt a frown drag at her face. Although currently unknown, possible connection between the 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐴 and clan of ninjas. People who have claimed to gain access in or around the clan base have suddenly turned up missing days after reporting their finds. No witnesses were able to verify who the missing persons were. Some citizens mentioned they were jealous of people who went to a mountain retreat near 𝗵𝗃𝗏𝗄𝐴 National Park. 3-star mission highly recommended. Advanced teams only. Kid, did you read what this says? People have gone missing and nobody knows who they were. It's almost like they never existed. Doesn't that strike you as kind of odd? Biting her bottom lip, the weapon quickly verified what city the disappearances happened in. It wasn't far from 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗃. Something about a resort up in the mountains of a national park, near Annapolis. Maybe we should send back up to 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗃. Wow. Liz finally looked up to see a 20-foot-high pile of giraffes burying Kid, Patty dancing around the mountain praising its mightiness in chants and dancing. That's pretty impressive, Patty. Just make sure you leave an air pocket for Kid. Oh, I forgot. Whoops. Patty giggled before pile-driving into the center of the mass. She emerged a minute later with an unconscious, foaming Reaper, holding him up by his collar. Liz shook her head. It would take a while for him to recover now. Found him. As much as she loved her sister, there were times she seemed to forget the human necessity of breathing. Still, Liz mused as Patty violently shook her meister around, origami flinging left and right. She wouldn't have it any other way. They were the only family she had now, and a wonky, sometimes disturbing one was better than none. Her troubled thoughts subsided to the back of her mind while she worked on reviving her meister, the papers forgotten on the table for the time being. Man, that was a lame battle. An old man turning into a 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐴 and killing innocent people because someone stole the last of his favorite candy? Sheesh, he could have just gotten another one. Black Star complained as he and 𝗬𝗏𝗃 made their way through Cairo, the city swarming with life in sweltering heat. Elaborate stalls lined nearly every inch of pathway, vendors calling out to locals and tourists alike. From fine silks to ancient medicinal treatments, if you needed it, they had it. Even if you didn't need it, they were going to sucker you into buying it. Think of it this way, Black Star. We stopped another 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐴 egg from fully hatching, so that's a plus. People won't have to worry as much when going out. 𝗬𝗏𝗃 reminded him lightly. Besides, I'm sure there will be someone who is willing to challenge you back at 𝗓𝗏𝗄𝐴. Oh, we should probably check in with Kid soon and update him now that we've completed the mission. Quickly scanning the area, kind black eyes landed on a shop selling various mirrors. She slipped through the crowds with ease and arrived at the stall. Dozens of intricate and shining hand mirrors lined the table, precious embedded gems reflecting brightly in the Egyptian sun. A local vendor with a splotchy mustache and beard snapped his eyes to his next target as she approached his stall, a devious dance in his dark eyes. Of course, he gave a slow look over as well. Miss, you have good taste. These are the finest ancient artifacts around. This one here, the middle-aged man with missing teeth grabbed a slim golden mirror embroidered with intricate glistening gems. Was rumored to have been used by Cleopatra herself. Very valuable item for such a good price. What do you say? Or, he cut off 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗆's polite decline and grabbed a rounder mirror, large dull gems lining the edges. Something with a little more bling to suit such a bright shining star as yourself? 𝗧𝗵𝗲 held back a gag as the man winked, his toothless grin widening as he slowly eyed her over once more. Before he could even reach the swell of her chest, an arm shot out and grabbed him by the neck. The weapon protested loudly as onlookers gawked at the commotion. I suggest you keep your eyes on her face and nowhere else. Am I clear? Black Star leaned in close and hissed to the man. His eyes flashed quickly to the Star Clan symbol, then reverted back just as fast. The vendor quickly nodded before shoving the mirror in his hands to 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗆 and ducked down below his stall in fear. 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗆 sighed heavily, but accepted the mirror before moving on. Walking side by side, the two remained silent for a few minutes, the loud chatter of the crowds washing over them. Black Star, you didn't have to go that far. You about gave him a heart attack. KH. He was about to start ogling at your boobs. How else was I going to stop him? Black Star huffed as he linked his hands behind his head. Besides, only I, the great Black Star, get to look at those pup. A fist collided with the ninja's face, sending him sprawling to the ground. 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗆 stood above him with a cold, silent fury in her eyes, fists clenched tight. The meister looked up at her with surprise, his fingertips grazing his now swelling cheek. I am not a prize to be ogled at. Partner or not, you will respect my body and privacy. When will you grow up, Black Star? I suggest you go cool off for a while since I'm going to check in with Lord Death. With one last death glare, the weapon vanished into the crowd, leaving a stunned Black Star on the ground. People whispered and a few took pictures of the ninja sitting sprawled on the dirt. With a TCH, the ninja leapt to his feet and crossed both arms over his chest. With a glare of his own, the people began to scramble away from him. 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗆 had become more sensitive to her body as the years went on. She hadn't changed much physically apart from growing another inch or two, but her backbone grew tougher and she took little to no nonsense. With harassing comments or looks, Black Star lowered his face to conceal it within his collar, an annoyed scowl on his face. He'd screwed up. Again. Damn woman, I was just defending you. Not like I care about you or anything. 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗆 quickly dispersed from the crowds, finding a secluded alleyway to use the mirror. Ensuring Black Star was still a ways off, she breathed against the mirror and began writing. He wouldn't be gone long. The blue-haired ninja always remaining nearby. Just a moment. That's all she needed to herself right now. 42-42-564, whenever you want to knock on death's door. The mirror rippled as the signal connected. It rang a few times before a familiar face appeared on the glass. Oh, hey 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗆𝗆. How's the mission going? Liz asked as she connected the line. Kid is a little preoccupied by Patty right now. He's going to be knocked out for a while. Hi Liz. Just wanted to let Lord Death know that the mission was a success. We acquired the precushion soul and are returning to base. 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗆𝗆 felt the smile on her face falter slightly when she saw Patty shaking Kid around like a rag doll. Liz noticed the look but just shrugged it off. Is everything alright? Oh nice. Great job on the mission. Oi Kid, Black Star and 𝗧𝗵𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆 are finished and headed back now. Liz called to the motionless meister. A delicate brow arched as Patty twisted him like a pretzel. Seriously? Get over the origami thing. It's not even worth it. Act like the damn Reaper you're supposed to be. Dance, little man, dance. Patty cackled as Kid violently snapped awake, pounding his fist into the floor with tears in his eyes as his foot was nearly touching the back of his head. Complying, the younger Thompson's sister released him before getting distracted by something else, bounding off to play with it. Got it done, sis. Good job, Patty. Sorry about that, 𝗬𝗧𝗵𝗲. How can I help? Kid coughed as he quickly dusted off his suit. He was still fairly new to being Lord Death, just shy of 3 years, but he'd caught on rather fast and had proved to be an excellent leader to both students and citizens of Death City. We're finished with our mission now. 𝐒𝐭𝐴 soul was acquired easily. Excellent work. Where's Black Star? Usually he doesn't leave your side anymore. Kid mused as he looked at 𝗬𝗵𝗲's surroundings, searching for the infamous blue-haired ninja. He didn't miss the frustrated sigh that released from the weapon, but apparently failed to see the tinge of pink on her cheeks. He's somewhere cooling off. A vendor was ogling me, and he snapped and grabbed him by the throat, then threatened him. She could feel a headache coming on and rubbed her temple with 2 fingers. And he said something inappropriate to me and I punched him. Feeling the regret and embarrassment heat up her skin, 𝗬𝗵𝗲 covered her face with her hands. Now that she was older and more mature, punching her partner wasn't something that should keep happening. It wasn't professional. Or nice. Liz let out a low, impressed whistle, hands on her hips as she gave a cheeky grin. He probably deserved it anyways. We all may have grown up more, but Black Star still lets stupid shit fall out of his mouth every now and then. Besides, the weapon shoved Kid out of the way before whispering into the mirror. Pretty sure he's got a major crush on you. I'm sure he was just defending you from harassment, and then doing it himself, of course, but that's because he's an idiot and doesn't know how to express his feelings very well. I think if you gave him the chance, he'd be a gentleman and treat you right. He's not that young boy anymore, 𝗬𝗵𝗲. He's become quite the man. Slightly taller than you, more muscles, leaner body. 𝗬𝗵𝗲 was as red as a tomato at this point, steam practically radiating from the top of her head. Her mouth failed to produce full sentences and instead let out a garbled string of words. Patty laughed in the background while Liz stood there with a shit-eating grin. Her work was done. Kid shoved the elder Thompson's sister out of the way and cleared his throat. Back to business. There wasn't time for gossip. There is one thing I would like to ask you, 𝗬𝗵𝗲. I'm sure you can relay this to Black Star when you see him again. Do you know anything about a cult of master ninjas located in Russia? Maka and Seoul are near that area doing a mission, and we've gotten strange reports of people going missing without a trace. Not even the villagers could describe who had gone missing. It seems like something is going over there, but I can't leave my post to check. Master ninja cult? 𝗬𝗵𝗲 placed a finger against her lips in thought. A vague blurb of information popped to the forefront of her mind, but it was too jumbled to decipher. It does sound familiar, but I'm not too sure. Black Star would possibly know, though I'm not sure where he is right now. I'll be sure to remember to pass it on. Very well, we'll see you here once you get back. Get out. The connection closed and 𝗬𝗵𝗲 let out a strained breath. Liz could see right through her innocent act, exposing her deep feelings for the reckless meister. It was only natural, of course, seeing as they'd been partners since she arrived at DWMA all those years ago. Time had flown so fast that it seemed like yesterday she was meeting a smaller, more egotistical version of Black Star, standing and proclaiming his greatness atop the 3 massive spikes adorning the school. She let her memories wash over her, closing dark eyes and leaning against the wall. Little did she know how much he would change her life from the instant they met. And to be fair, thoughts of romanticism emerged every now and then. It was only natural the older she got. But without any experience in what to do or say, 𝗬𝗵𝗲 was at a complete loss when it came to expressing the desires of going on a date or just relaxing together. Maka wasn't any help as she focused solely on her job. Patty didn't care. Liz, she was pretty sure the blonde was planning something behind the scenes to push her and Black Star together. A shuddering sigh slipped out. Just thinking about the possibilities had her heart racing, black eyes closing in an attempt to quell them. Her soul twitched slightly, and 𝗬𝗵𝗲 knew it was him before he even landed silently in the sand. Cracking an eye open, she noticed he looked sheepish, maybe even a little nervous as he kept one of his hands behind his back, the other rubbing the back of his head. Odd. Black Star never acted so out of character. Concern rose as she pushed off from the wall, hands raising to clasp against her chest. Something wrong, Black Star? It's not like you to be na. A bouquet of flowers was roughly shoved into her arms, fully startling the weapon from her youthful memories. beautiful vibrant blue Egyptian lotus popped brightly against the dull brown of the dirt and houses. Bright purple chrysanthemums adorned the empty spaces between the lotus flowers with smaller bunches of acacia and jasmine delicately tying everything together. It was the most beautiful floral arrangement she'd ever seen. "I'm sorry for what I said earlier. I shouldn't have said something stupid like that." Black Star apologized, rubbing the back of his head nervously with an averted gaze. "That vendor shouldn't have treated you that way. That's why I snapped. Course I say the same shit. I mean it, 𝗬𝗵𝗲. I'm sorry." 𝗬𝗵𝗲 felt her heart swell at the sincerity of his apology and approached him as he rambled on. Placing a hand against his shoulder, she leaned forward and rested her head against his, sharing her feelings through their glowing link. "Thank you, Black Star. It means a lot to me that you were being protective. And I'm sorry I punched you. I let my emotions get the better of me in the heat of the moment." It was Black Star's turn to become colored, and he quickly ducked his face into his shirt collar once more to hide. 𝗬𝗵𝗲 thought it was the cutest thing, watching him become shy. A stark contrast to the brash, brawling normal self. "𝗧𝗏, I deserved it anyways. But if you're done here, let's get going. I may or may not have started a street fight to cool off." "I'm not surprised. There's no keeping you down, is there?" 𝗬𝗵𝗲 giggled as she reached for his hand, pulling him back through the alley and towards the chaos that was, intentionally, raging on. "I suppose if you were to join in, I would wait here for you. I won't stop you if that's what you want." Black Star gave her his flashy smile and leaned in to press his lips briefly against her temple before launching himself into the fray. Men were flying left and right as he challenged anyone and everyone he could reach, gloating about his godliness. 𝗬𝗵𝗲 felt her face heat up like a furnace and quickly went to find somewhere to sit before she fainted from all the excitement. Maybe it wouldn't be so hard to tell him how she felt. "What the hell is that thing?" "It looks like a bear mixed with a giant, burly lumberjack." Seoul blurted out as the 𝗵𝗃𝗃 burst through an explosion, razor-sharp claws swinging down on the fighting duo. They separated a good distance, leaving the creature centered in the skirmish. Maka clenched her jaw hard to control the adrenaline dying off. Talk about timing. Black blood wouldn't last much longer at this rate, 𝗬𝐻 barely keeping it together against the mysterious man. The creature was 10 foot tall, easily surpassing 400 pounds with its enormous body. Snow-white fur covered nearly every inch on the beast, making it comparative to a bear save for the fact that it was very lanky. No doubt there were massive muscles just beneath the fur cover. 2-foot-long claws protruded from each massive paw, the ends dangerously pointed tips. It had similar claws on its feet, though not nearly as long, but still nonetheless deadly. Its face was the most disturbing part of the whole ensemble. It looked to be a mix between numerous human faces and various animal body heads, constantly shifting and morphing faces. Razor-sharp fangs jutted out from its long snout in all directions, each one at least 6 inches long and covered in putrid red saliva. There had to be at least a dozen of them covering its upper and lower jaws. It looks like it also collected the souls of animals along with humans. Maka breathed out, emerald eyes wide as her brain tried to process the bizarre creature launching itself forward with fury. Fear began to grip at her heart, the terrifying 𝗵𝗃𝗃 like something out of a nightmare. Flashbacks of the fight with 𝐒𝐻𝗄 briefly filled her vision. "What the hell? Maka, don't just stand there and gawk, block damn it." Seoul snapped out, pulling his meister back to the real world a moment too late. Maka grounded her stance and swung the scythe around, blade clashing against nails, the grating sound resonating for miles. It didn't take long for the meister to realize the creature was stronger than her, and with a mighty roar, she was thrown from the roof of the house down to the streets below. The impact was softened, but the compressed snow did some mild damage. Possibly broken ribs and a bruised shoulder were just the start she felt. "Maka, you alright?" Seoul called out as his meister let out a wheezing cough, the wind knocked completely from her. "Get up." "No." With a strained grunt she rose, using Seoul as a support until scrambled bearings were gathered. Her head swam and she closed both eyes to steady violently swirling vision, taking as deep a breath as she could to calm it. If she could get the black blood to stitch her back together just long enough to end this fight, they could win. But had they already reached their limit? That hurt. Maka grunted as she placed a hand over tender ribs, wincing with every move. Something was broken already, if not fractured. That thing is a lot stronger than us. What do you think, Soul? The best option would be to lure it out of the village and try to take it down in an open area. I don't know how much longer we can strain the black blood before it starts to draw me down into the madness. Maybe 10 minutes max. Pretty sure you've got some broken ribs there, and it won't be easy to fight with them that way without the little red bastard's assistance. Our ninja friend there used up most of its time limit. Said ninja was currently dodging blows from the enormous beast, using the snow to his advantage as he kicked out one leg from beneath the precushion, the slick roof sending it crashing to the ground. He made it look effortless, almost like he could predict its movements. 10 minutes? I only need 3. Maka smirked as she whirled the scythe around her, stopping it in a ready position over her shoulder. With a hiss of pain, the meister readied herself for the rushing heat of the black blood's healing abilities. The creature let out another enormous roar. The power of it caused the buildings to rattle, some of the weaker ones crumbling to the ground in massive heaps of debris and snow. Windows shattered from every frame in the area, exploding outward with such great force that they became deadly projectiles. Maka spun the scythe around to deflect them. The bigger shards shattered noisily against the blade, while some of the smaller ones managed to slip through and slice through the meister's clothing and exposed skin. She winced as she felt them slicing through flesh, the cold air stinging painfully as it hit the open wounds. The black blood was still pumping through her veins, albeit at a slower rate due to the high drainage earlier. The wounds would still be there, but the pain had stopped and the blood clotted quickly. There would be time to worry about those later. They had a 𝐒𝐻𝐻 to hunt. Move out of the way before I slice you in half. The ninja shot his head up in time to see the meister wielding her transformed scythe, aiming directly for the 𝐒𝐻𝐻 crawling its way back up the roof. With a curse, he jumped backwards, not wanting to get wrapped up with the death scythe. He'd researched everything about weapons and meisters years ago during his training with the monks, but seeing a death scythe in person was a completely different experience. The two worked in harmony together, the meister connecting her soul with the weapons, in turn the weapon returning her soul's wavelength back to with added power. Of course, this was on a whole new level with the scythe weapon having completed becoming a death scythe, the very last one. Throw in the black blood and you have a nearly unbeatable team. He watched in concealed awe at how fast and powerful Maka M was. Her effortless swings, jabs, and kicks made it look like child's play from his point of view. The 𝐒𝐻𝐻 swiped at her again, but she was prepared for it and launched herself upwards over the beast, the scythe transforming once more. Rumors had been spread all over the world about the secret form passed down from her mother many years ago, the 𝐒𝐻𝐻 hunter. She swung down with all her strength, catching the edge of the blade against the creature's neck, the blade sinking down several inches through its thick skin. But even he knew it wouldn't be that easy of a target to take down. The 𝐒𝐻𝐻 roared in anger before grabbing onto the scythe's blade and yanking it from its thick neck with little trouble. Its large teeth clamped down on the ginormous glowing scythe and began to crush it as if it were a gnat. "Let go of him, you asshole bear!" Maka screamed as she could feel the 𝐒𝐻𝐻 hunter form beginning to break, cracks running all along the scythe. Soul coughed up a glob of black blood, trails dripping from his lips and down his chin. It seemed that was the breaking point for the meister. Her anger and determination radiated off of her body in massive waves. Forgoing her grip on the shaft, Maka dropped down to the roof and pulled her arm back with a tight fist before launching herself at the beast, wild emotions fueling her attack. "Maka, it may have worked once, but it won't work again, idiot." Soul screamed as he watched his meister run headfirst towards the creature. Recklessness still ran through her blood, and it drove him insane. "You're going to get yourself killed. Listen to me for once, damn it." 𝐒𝐻𝐻 hunter was about to break. He could feel the electricity running across his skin like fire. Knowing it was risky to do so in the middle of a battle, Soul began to revert back to death scythe form, then onto human form. Luckily, Maka had distracted the 𝐒𝐻𝐻 quickly, and it had released its jaws from the weapon. As soon as he was freed from the 𝐒𝐻𝐻's grip, he stood to go after Maka when it happened. Time slowed as the two men watched Maka M punch the 𝐒𝐻𝐻 in the center of its forehead, unleashing a battle cry as her fist connected with a crack. The sharp canines tore at the flesh of her hands and arms, but she failed to notice it. Some of the putrid and rotting saliva dripped onto her clothing, the material beginning to quickly melt away. For a moment nothing happened. The air was silent, not even the wind blowing. A pulse of energy rippled over them, vanishing as quickly as it had come. 𝐒𝐿 eyed the scene for a moment before suddenly becoming very calm and relaxed, stuffing his hands into his pockets casually as he let out a held breath. He sent the ninja a smirk which grew into a toothy grin after receiving a startled look in return. The ninja felt the hairs on the back of his neck and arms stand straight up, immense power running over his body. The wind seemed to pick up, surrounding all four of them. Yet outside of that, the air remained still. Maka dropped back onto the roof before standing up straight, keeping her fist close to her upper body, waiting. The 𝐒𝐻𝑚 had only just moved to look at her when a crack appeared at the top of its head, quickly traveling down the length of its body. A bright flash of blue erupted from within the 𝐒𝐻𝑚, and it silently imploded into nothingness. Dozens of souls ascended into the sky, silently floating into the dark storm clouds. A red and black soul remained floating just in front of the meister with its tail flickering angrily at her. Apparently punching them really does work. Master Ninja whispered as Soul walked over to his partner, placing a hand on her lower back as he checked in on her. Maka turned her head and gave him a big smile before motioning to the hovering soul. He gave her a toothy grin before reaching out and grabbing the soul. The ninja felt like he was going to be sick when he watched the weapon open wide and chew on the soul, letting out a satisfied belch when it was gone. He held back a gag by pressing the back of his hand over a covered mouth. Disgusting. Now, this is where I would turn my attention to you and continue what was started. Maka spoke calmly as she turned bright emerald eyes to lock with piercing blue ones. But I don't see a point to it at the moment. Just know that I have your soul wavelength memorized, meaning you can run and you can hide, but I'll know exactly where to find you. Send that warning to those commanding you from behind the scenes. Those eyes nearly burned a hole through his soul. Was she really this powerful, stronger than he ever anticipated? Had her soul perception grown tremendously over the years since the battle with 𝐒𝐻𝑚? It took him a few seconds to snap out of it, but when he did, it was to let out a short laugh. Very well, I can tell by your eyes you speak the truth. I suppose this is where we part for the time being. I have everything I need to know. And with a smoke bomb he was gone. Was there even a point to fighting with him? All he did was pretty much waste time and then stand there and watch as we killed the 𝐒𝐻𝑚. Soul growled out in frustration. Maka just let out a light laugh before grimacing in pain, torn and dirted glove holding her ribs tenderly. Black blood had worn off, the effects fizzling away with each ragged breath. There was going to be a lot of pain and soon. He was testing us, seeing if we were strong enough to be useful for whatever purpose his leader ordered. Pretty standard bad guy protocol. So uncool. 42-42-564, whenever you want to knock on death's door. Soul muttered to himself as he wrote the familiar number on the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the inn's shower room. Shared showers and bathrooms were common in Russia apparently. Not the greatest thing seeing overweight, naked men wandering around, but out of his control. Both had returned back to the inn with good news, much to the villagers' relief, and requested showers to get cleaned up. The receptionist offered to assist Maka with the scrubbing, and the meister silently agreed, her face tinting red from embarrassment. Soul watched as the young woman whisked his meister away, feeling the unease in her soul as he left her sight. He let out a loud sigh. What had happened in the black room hadn't left his mind for hours. The way she acted was, well, like a woman in love would be the best way to put. He knew for sure he loved her, he had for a few years now, but was she ready and willing to love and accept him? More than just partners? Soul, how was the mission? Kid appeared in the mirror, looking sleep-deprived and disheveled. Soul could see Liz wave from the background, a mountain of papers stacked on the table she was set at. Patty was nowhere to be seen, probably sleeping on the floor or going to get more craft supplies. Got the kitchen, Soul, but what? What happened, Soul? Lord Death was suddenly alert and very awake, golden eyes searching his best friend's face for answers. Soul let out a heavy sigh, running a hand through his damp locks. Where to even begin with this? That 𝐒𝐻𝑚, it wasn't normal, kid. It looked like a combination of both human and animal souls. Beat the shit out of Maka. She's got possible broken ribs and a banged-up shoulder. Cuts all over. She'll be alright though. Is that even possible for someone or something to take animal souls and use them to become a 𝐒𝐻𝐻? Kid was silent for a few minutes, his hand cupping against his chin as he thought. I may have read at some point that while it is possible, it's very rare, only 1 or 2 confirmed cases of it happening, but that was maybe a couple of 100 years ago. No reports since then, I'm afraid. If that's the case, then we'll need to be extra vigilant from now on. So, now we get to deal with animal 𝐒𝐻𝐻 hybrids that are stronger than the human version? Great. Soul groaned as he slid a damp hand down his face, the stress evident. Would explain why we got the shit beat out of us so easily. That thing threw Maka aside like she was nothing more than a fly. It even clamped down on 𝐒𝐻𝐻 and nearly broke it in seconds. It nearly broke 𝐒𝐻𝐻? Has that ever happened before? Even through the mirror, Soul could tell Kid looked very tense. It wasn't a very good conversation to be having anyways, not with what they uncovered. Added stress only caused more restrictions with missions down the line. The only times 𝐒𝐻𝐻 has broken was when we fought Stein during those extracurricular classes and the battle with 𝐎𝐻𝐻. This thing was breaking it with its teeth. Soul looked down at his hands, the memory still fresh in his mind. Even the sensation hadn't washed off in the shower, the electricity still barely lingering. Maka was reckless again. She released me to punch the damn thing in the face. Worked, but stupid idea nonetheless. His fists clenched tightly. How could he be so useless, again? Seems she's got a bad habit of doing that, Kid mused with a chuckle, some of the tension easing through the glass. Listen, Soul, I was considering sending you on another mission roughly in that area, though a little more to the north. Something about a ninja clan hiding up near the mountains. We've got a copy of the request that says there have been people vanishing after going to a retreat near there. I understand that since Maka is unfit to battle so soon after receiving injuries, we can postpone it until a later time. Funny you mention ninjas, Kid, because we ran into one claiming to be a master before the 𝐒𝐻𝐻 found us. Wait, are you serious? How did you? Kid stuttered, clearly surprised at the coincidence. His face got comically close to the mirror, scrutinizing the less than impressed weapon. You're not joking, are you? The odds of it being a coincidence are. I wouldn't joke about this, Kid. Guess he was here to monitor then attacked us. So we fought back. Used quite a bit of the black blood and barely managed to scratch him. When he fought the 𝐒𝐻𝐻, it was like he knew how it would move. There's something odd about it all. It didn't add up. How could that man know how to avoid the fast and unpredictable movements of the 𝐒𝐻𝐻? There was more to the story than they knew. Soul ended the call with Kid after an elderly man had entered the room and was proudly parading around, eagerly boasting and showing off his assets. Soul took that as his cue to leave with a disgusted shudder. Kid requested a follow-up with him after a few days once Maka was up and moving around more. A blast of cold air hit the weapon as he left the steaming shower room, a chill running up his spine. He could sense Maka was back in the room, and his body automatically made a beeline for it when he was stopped. You were the one to defeat the creature, no? A middle-aged woman from behind the desk stood from her chair and walked around, her short heels clicking softly against the worn wood. Her brown hair was streaked with silver, placed in a slightly messy bun at the back of her head. Her crisp work uniform was slightly tattered and dirty, a sign that fearing for her life was more important than laundry. Soft brown eyes stared at him with such gratitude and love that it made the weapon falter in his steps. The fine lines on her face had deepened, giving her the appearance of someone twice her age. Within seconds, Soul found himself trapped in a tight hug, the woman sobbing against him quietly, shoulders shaking. Stunned, the weapon just stood silently as the woman bawled into his shoulder, letting out all of the pent-up anger, grief, frustration, and sensation of helplessness. You have avenged my husband and child. Thank you, young man. They can rest in peace now, bless their souls. She pulled back and cupped his face, placing her lips briefly against either cheek, her eyes shining with tears. With one last hug, she pulled back and wiped at her face with the back of her hand. Your partner, she is waiting for you in the room. I have food ready whenever you want it, Daddy. Please have a good rest and thank you again. Maka drowsily opened her eyes at the sound of a door opening and closing, mind still fuzzy. Pillows propped her up against the head of the bed, making it difficult to sleep comfortably, though it kept away the insane throbbing headache. The mattress sank next to her and she rolled her head in that direction, a lazy smile on her face knowing who it was. "How are you feeling, Maka?" Good. They gave me something for the pain. You should try it, 𝗧𝗏. It's relaxing." The meister slurred as she tried to shake the drowsiness off, only succeeding in making the room spin faster. 𝗧𝗏 noticed and placed a hand on the top of her head, gently resting it back against the pillows. She gave a loopy smile before closing her eyes, letting out a happy sigh. "You sure can't handle pain meds, can you?" 𝗧𝗏 teased as she began wiggling her fingers around uncontrollably on top of the heavy wool blanket that practically swallowed her petite body. She cracked an eye open and stuck her tongue out at him before resuming her entertainment. This could be some good blackmail for the future, but it would probably end up with him being buried 6 feet under. "The nice drug man told me I had fractured some, Maka repeated, her brows furrowing in confusion as the word escaped her brain. It was there one moment, gone the next. "These things here, 𝗧𝗏, here, and here." She pointed to her ribs twice on the left and once on the right. 3 ribs? "Man, I can't take you anywhere without you punching 𝐒𝐻𝑖𝐺 in the face and getting injured." "Not cool." 𝗧𝗏 gave her a toothy grin as he lightly shook his head, moving his stare away from her and towards the wall. It was difficult to see his meister in such a state, especially when he was supposed to protect her, even at the cost of his life. Yet he bailed in the middle of a fight and had to depend on Maka, who was already suffering the after effects of the black blood. Maka fully opened her eyes to look at him, the haze fading momentarily. She lifted a hand, which felt like a ton of bricks, and rested it on his firmly. He instinctively grabbed it and held tight, red eyes darting to lock with her hazy green ones. Neither spoke for a minute, allowing the courage to speak build up. Subconsciously, 𝗧𝗏 rubbed tiny circles on the back of her scratched-up hand. "I couldn't stand to see you hurt again, 𝗧𝗏. That night still haunts me a lot. I failed to protect you and I regret it every day. If I have to do stupid shit to protect you, I will. If I have to throw you down and face an enemy head-on to save you, I will. I'll gladly give my life in exchange for yours, 𝗧𝗏. Always, I promise." She still slurred slightly, but the words came out strong with true emotion. 𝗧𝗏 was speechless. Maka was always too proud to share her feelings out in the open like that, though she usually shared them with her actions instead. But nonetheless it caused butterflies in the weapon's stomach, causing his heart to fill with adoration. Shifting his body so he was facing her, he guided her hand to rest over his heart as he leaned forward, pressing his head against hers. He could feel her soul vibrate happily, syncing perfectly with his own as they shared an intimate moment. "You're too cool for me, Maka, you know that, right?" 𝗧𝗏 whispered after a few minutes of reveling in the pure bliss. "Ugh, coolest partner ever, you said?" Maka slurred as sleep threatened to drop her into the awaiting darkness. She didn't want to ruin the moment by falling asleep. That'd be so uncool. "Coolest partner ever," 𝗧𝗏 responded earnestly. He could tell she was trying to stay awake as long as she could, but sleep was quickly tugging her under. Pulling back from her, 𝗧𝗏 kept her hand briefly against his chest before removing it and gently setting it back on the bed at her side. Maka made an annoyed grunt and twitched her fingers at him to come back. So demanding. When did she get so clingy? "Hold on, let's get you settled first." What would she ever do without him? Probably live a stress-free life with enough books to build a palace. Carefully slipping his hand beneath her head, the weapon used his other hand to remove some of the other pillows, making the angle more comfortable. Maka winced a bit at being shifted, but otherwise made no complaints. Once she gave a nod of approval, 𝗧𝗏 let her down gently before pulling the blanket up to her shoulders. The meister squirmed a little before flopping her arms out from beneath the hot blanket. "Hot." The meister whined before relaxing into the soft pillows, her breathing evening out once more. 𝗧𝗏 chuckled to himself as he finished getting ready for bed. He quickly changed into an old pair of shirt and sweats, tossing his battle-dirted clothes on the floor. Exhaustion hit him like a brick wall, and he finally resigned himself to the welcoming bed. Flopping gracefully face-first on top of the scratchy blanket, he felt his eyes droop as sleep began to drag him under. Something twitched against his hand, and he reluctantly opened an eye to see Maka's finger reaching out. Slipping his hand into hers, he intertwined their fingers together firmly. With what energy he had left, He brought her fingers to his lips and pressed against them lightly. "I'll protect you always, Maka. I promise." A figure dashed through the white-laden hills, darting effortlessly between the thick forest foliage. Winter had taken its toll on the vegetation as the trees bared no leaves, just the gnarled, twisting spines of once luscious green branches now lying dormant and covered in thick piles of winter. A branch snapped and the figure immediately darted to the side, taking cover behind a large, naked fir tree. With bated breath and a silent peek, they waited. A shuffling sound echoed loudly through the sparse trees, scattering the noise in every direction. Ears trained for such an occasion, the person closed their eyes and focused, taking in every sound of the forest. A bird in the distance, chirping softly. A fox stealthily hunting its prey beneath the layers of snow. Mice burrowing deeper underground, escaping the stealthy fox just above. 3 deer shuffling through the deep snow to search for any foliage to devour. Another shuffle and they pinpointed the sound. Throwing their eyes open, the person climbed silently into the tree, using the high vantage point to their advantage as they scanned the area. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the shuffling grew louder, getting closer to the tree they were currently waiting in. With a swift and silent wrist flick, a kunai slid into their palm, the black metal stark against the surrounding area. Lifting their throwing arm up by their shoulder, they waited for the moment to strike. Slowly, a figure emerged from behind a tree, white clothes nearly indistinguishable from the snow. Their movements were slow as they trudged along, using any tree to support them along the way. Judging from the backpack, it could be assumed it was a traveler, perhaps having gotten lost in the endless white. White clouds filled the air as heavy breathing pumped from the traveler's mouth, the frigid temperatures taking a toll on their body. Lowering the weapon, narrowed eyes watched the person stumble, face planting in the snow. They were motionless for minutes, and most likely presumed dead. With a light jump they landed in the snow, inspecting the body for signs of life. It was faint, but there was indeed still a heartbeat, albeit growing weaker by the minute. Grabbing the traveler by the shoulder, the figure shoved them onto their back, eyes grazing over the snow-covered face. It appeared to be an elderly man, judging by the heavy facial lines and graying hair. It was his stupidity that would kill him, trekking into bad weather like this at his age. Quick hands searched any and all pockets for supplies or valuables. A glint of light flashed by the elder's neck, and with deft fingers, a chain was removed from its home. Dangling from the bottom of the chain was a locket in the shape of a crescent moon. There was a small latch connecting the sides together, but it had been broken long ago, barely hanging by a thin wire. With a bit of fumbling it managed to snap open. Inside was a weathered photo of a couple on one side and a newer portrait of a small child, a girl. An inscription was written beneath it. "My light, my love, my life. Anya." A groan from the man caused the figure to leap back, taking cover within a tree mere feet away. So he was still alive. Tough old bastard. "I know so someone is there, please I ask for an ear," the man croaked as he coughed, the sound wet and hard. "A 𝗓𝗏𝗵𝗲 man's wish." The figure hidden in the tree watched with suspicious eyes, leery of the stranger. A part of him wanted to just leave and abandon the delirious old man, but another was curious about his dying words. There was still time before needing to return to base. A few more minutes wouldn't hurt. Besides, he might have something of value on his person. Supplies were hard to come by in the harsh winter months. "Speak your words, old man, though none may ever hear them." The figure spoke emotionlessly as they landed back next to the dying man. The man let out a strained laugh, cracking his eyes open, glassy eyes staring at the clouded heavens with a small smile. "The trees shall carry on my words." Another painful cough. "I know what you are, son. No need to be so guarded. Then you must know what happens once you discover who I am. Happened to my younger brother, I am aware." The man was growing tired, his eyelids drooping. Bitter cold and lungs of fluid weren't the best of combinations. "But IW will spare you the effort of killing me and Ninja, for I am already a dead man. IW wish for you to heed my warning." The old man shot forward with surprising speed and strength, grabbing the ninja by the collar as he dragged him close to the putrid, rotting scent of death spewing from between cracked lips. Crazed black eyes locked with the ninja's own, his stare swirling the depths of hell within them. His mouth opened to an unnatural size, sharp black rotting teeth lining nearly every inch of his mouth as he gave a crazed smile. Fear began to climb down the ninja's spine, paralyzing him in place. He tried to avert his eyes to no avail. Those black eyes had placed a spell over him, sending pure terror coursing through his body. Those who meddle outside the laws of God shall face the wrath of the Reaper. There is no redemption for those who break the sacred law. You have been warned. Just as quickly as it had started, it ended. The old man's eyes rolled into the back of his head, and his grip released as he fell into the snow with a soft thud. The ninja felt his collar where the stranger had just grabbed him, the spot feeling frozen. Either he had hallucinated, or the old man reverted back to human form as he died. A glimmer of light emitted from around the neck of the corpse, and the ninja felt his heart skip a beat. It was the necklace he'd torn off mere minutes ago still secured around the man's neck. Abruptly he stood and fumbled backwards before taking off through the woods, leaving the corpse alone in the snow. As soon as the ninja was gone, the body began to dissolve into nothingness, leaving just a blackened spot covering the earth. The words "the Reaper shall bring judgment" permanently scarred into the ground. Kid paced back and forth anxiously in the death room, his arms crossed over his chest in concentration as both weapons watched on in boredom. Liz had been watching him pace for nearly an hour now, growing rather agitated with his repetitive, endless behavior. Patty was snoring quietly next to her. The chair she occupied was teetering dangerously on the back two legs, somehow never falling over. "Kid, you're going to wear a hole in the floor at that rate," Liz said tersely as he picked up the pace, muttering under his breath quickly. "You need to calm down and think about this logically. I know you're worried about them, but 𝗏 and Maka can take care of themselves. They've proven that more times than we can count." Kid was growing anxious about the new looming threat in addition to the newly hybrid 𝐒𝐻𝐻. It wasn't a coincidence that a ninja would suddenly appear where 𝗏 and Maka were hunting a 𝐒𝐻𝐻, nor that the ninja could easily dodge its attacks while Maka was severely injured. What was their connection? Were the master ninjas creating these 𝐒𝐻𝐻? And for what purpose? This would be so much easier if he could just leave. Lord Death, sorry for the interruption. Kid stopped his pacing and looked up to see Stein standing a mere few feet from him, his hands shoved roughly into his pockets. While the man barely appeared to age over the last few years, more scars and stitches covered pale flesh. A brief glasses adjustment was made as a lit cigarette was tucked into the corner of his mouth. Professor Stein, what can I do for you?" Uncrossing his arms, the Reaper took a more relaxed pose as he moved to his chair. Gracefully dropping down into it, tired golden eyes met with calm green ones as Kid paid full attention to the meister. "Just as long as it's not bad news. It's already been a hectic day in that department. I looked into those master ninjas at the library, but nothing really came out of it. There was a paragraph in one book that mentioned a possible previous association between them and a group of witches, but I'm afraid nothing more than that. Either they've been erased from history, or they're excellent at hiding from the world." Stein cranked the screw on his head a few times before pulling the cigarette from his mouth after a heavy inhale. "I'm not an expert on ninjas, but we have a duo that are. I would suggest speaking with them about it once they return within the next few days." "Thank you, Stein. I've already mentioned to Tsubaki and she recalled it sounding familiar but couldn't place it. She will ask Black Star as well." Kid rested his chin on intertwined fingers, mind racing as he searched for any hidden knowledge of the clan. "But what I don't understand is how easily 𝗏 and Maka ran into one. It wasn't a coincidence that a ninja was there when the 𝐒𝐻𝐻 appeared. There's something going on between that clan and all these new hybrid 𝐒𝐻𝐻 popping up everywhere, but I can't figure it out." Kid sighed heavily. Why didn't any of it make sense? He should be able to deduce the puzzle. He was the Grim Reaper after all. Stein stood there for a few moments, slowly inhaling the sweet nectar of nicotine before releasing a cloud of smoke to the side. He adjusted his glasses with his middle finger as he spoke. "Don't stress yourself over this, kid. Everything will fall into place sooner or later." "Has 𝗏 told Maka yet?" "No." Kid shook his head slowly. "If she knew, she'd rush out the door to find them and wipe everyone out." A small smirk adorned the Reaper's face at the image of Maka wrecking mayhem on a bunch of ninjas. She tended to go overboard a plethora of times. There's a reason she's the best meister at the academy. After her mother, of course. Stein smiled with the cigarette clenched between his teeth. If anyone can take care of it, it's her. Soul will help keep her in line. I really hope you're right, Professor Stein. I really do. She could feel herself floating in a haze of black mist, the deafening silence nearly causing her to slip into protruding tendrils of madness. There was no way to tell how much time had passed, but it was enough for boredom to kick in. No matter how far she swam, it was the same thing. Never-ending silence and darkness. Maka huffed and curled into a ball, hugging her knees to her chest. Was she inside her soul again? Or was this the median between life and death? You're not dead, dearie. Just in a state of unconsciousness. Taken quite the beating, haven't you? You really should stop being so abusive to me. A familiar voice spoke up, causing pigtails to swish around as she turned to see. The little red imp feigned hurt, his gnarly fingers pressing against his heart. Immediately distrust filled Maka's expression, and a 𝗧𝗪𝐾 slipped out. Are you here to mock me, or are you going to help me get out of this? Maka huffed with arms over her chest, glaring at the imp. With the imp here, it made things more serious. He controlled the domain around them. Darkness and despair, a satisfying forte of his. Soul is right, quite the demanding one, aren't you? He snickered as he effortlessly walked closer to the meister, ignoring the burning glare. You've pushed my limit too far this time, which in turn does more harm than good to your body. You see, dearie, because you keep pushing the limits of the black blood, it accelerates the madness and causes you to be more easily drawn down into the depths. Now, don't panic. It won't get you killed as long as you watch your limitations with the black blood. But if you continue to push the limits, then you'll find yourself in a situation like 𝗏𝗏. You'll lose the ability to stay sane, and the black blood will absorb your soul as you lose full control of yourself. Your anti-demon wavelength can only go so far if there's an extreme external source of madness around. Maka swallowed hard. Lose the ability to use black blood? They'd been using it fine for years without many issues. It was practically a death sentence once the black blood lost its healing properties. And external madness. What would happen if an outside source of madness overtook the black blood's own madness? Death. Painful death. That was the only outcome she could concoct. So all I have to do is watch the limit? That shouldn't be too hard. You say that, but we both know that once it starts to take control, you'll feel the urge for more power each and every time. Even Soul knows his limit before the madness takes over. The meister sat in silence as she tried to wrap everything around her head. The demon crossed his leg over the other, acting as though he was sitting in a chair as he waited for her to respond. Nails tapped along to an invisible piano song. I can't tell Soul about this. He'll make sure we never use it again. Maka concluded finally after tremendous thought. We've fought before without it, and we can do it again. It's not worth the risk. And here I thought you were the smart one. The imp was suddenly inches from her face, deranged red eyes boring dangerously into wide emerald as he snarled. How exactly do you plan to keep it from him? I am him. He is me. I am you. You are me. We are all connected together in body and soul. You can't keep your thoughts locked down every time you're around him. He'll find out sooner or later, before you die or after you die. Your choice. Maka Albern, choose wisely. The imp vanished, leaving Maka to float alone in the darkness once more. Her anger got the better of her, and she screamed all of her frustrations into the void. By the time she was finished releasing her frustrations, her throat had become hoarse. She floated for what felt like eternity again, muttering angrily under her breath. In the middle of a tangent about the ignorant imp, a light flashed from her right, and she abruptly turned to look. Something was coming at her fast. How it moved through the viscous substance, she didn't know. But it wasn't stopping. A flash of white. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized what it was. How did it get in here? Maka whispered to herself as the meister turned to try and float away, panic gripping her heart. It was like swimming through sludge as she kicked and pushed as hard as she could to escape. But it was swift. It hit her fast and hard. A large, clawed hand shot out and grabbed her by the neck. A strangled yelp slipped through her lips as she stared wide-eyed at the creature. When they'd fought it, Maka couldn't get a detailed look at the horrendous face, but looking at it from such a close angle sent chills down her spine. Its face morphed rapidly, ranging from various animals and back to human, instantaneously. Tears slipped out as she stared. Her body wanted to look away, escape from the horror, yet her mind was frozen in place, too terrified to send any flight commands. The faces began to slow down, slowly ticking through them like a Rolodex. With a final click, it stopped. The face was familiar, way too familiar for comfort. Maka stared directly at her own face on the creature's head, its expression calm and collected. Scythe wielder, Maka Alburn. Meister to death scythe soul eater Evans. Age 17, nearing 18. Height 5 feet 7 inches. Weight 125 pounds. Eyes green. Hair sandy. Blood type O. It even sounded like her. It stopped within inches of her own face, the creature's mouth opening wide to reveal dangerously sharp teeth dripping with acidic red saliva. Maka felt her stomach churn but could only struggle weakly as consciousness began to fade. Oxygen. You'll never be able to defeat a 𝗓𝗫 like me, it purred lowly in her voice. For you may be the reaper who slays those who have broken the sacred law, but I am the 𝗓𝗫 who devours those reapers. I know everything about you, from what you eat for breakfast to every dream you have, as well as your deepest feelings for your weapon that you keep locked away because you're afraid of him not sharing the feelings back. You better give up, girl, or your life will be mine for eternity. 3 long claws punctured her stomach and instantly blood spurted from her mouth. The darkness overcame her, and she fell into silence. Maka shot straight up with a strangled scream, sweat drenching every inch of her body as she fought to breathe. The sudden movement caused pain to shoot up her abdomen, and she doubled over as every muscle contracted tightly, arms wrapping against the screaming muscles in attempt to ease the tension. Tears streamed down a ghostly face while her body spasmed violently from the sudden attack. Another sharp spasm had the young woman falling from the bed to the floor. She curled into a ball on the cool floor, her mouth open in a silent scream. The door slammed open and footsteps thudded across the floor, a flash of white moving into blurred vision. Maka, what's wrong? Take a deep breath. Soul had panicked the moment he'd heard the cry and felt the pain inside of his soul. He winced a bit at the level of pain radiating from her soul, its cries instinctively syncing with his own wavelength. Maka's body was shaking as she tried to curl herself into a tighter ball on the floor, nails digging into her back to anchor back to reality. Cursing under his breath, the weapon carefully lifted her from the floor and pulled Maka into his lap, placing his hand on the back of sandy locks. Not even the Azura nightmares caused a strong reaction like this. Was it the black blood acting up again? It's alright. I'm here, Maka. Just breathe. It'll be okay. Rubbing circles on her back seemed to help somewhat as the constricting hold eventually loosened. Soul. Maka gasped out in between sobs, slender arms quickly wrapping around his neck. I am fine. Just got up too fast. Do you need more pain meds? You've been out nearly 2 days now. I haven't been able to wake you. They said it was injury trauma or something. 2 days. Was that how long she was floating in the darkness? It felt longer than that. More like an eternity. She could still feel the creature's claws around her neck, slicing through her stomach like thin air, and she shivered. The pain felt so real. The 𝗓𝗫 was dead. It shouldn't still be haunting her like this. And no, Maka mumbled into Soul's neck, his musk washing over her, calming her slightly. Every single quality about him was comforting, from his crooked smile to the musk of sandalwood and myrrh. She'd never admit aloud, but whenever they were apart, Maka Alburn felt lonely. More than the Meister would ever admit. I'm fine. Soul knew she probably wasn't aware that her thoughts were connecting with his, the red demon warning her about the black blood and its limits, her hidden feelings for him, and then there was that. The hybrid 𝗓𝗫 had found its way into her mind, leaving a threatening warning with dire consequences should she continue to pursue it. He tightened his grip around her waist. No way in hell would it take his Meister. He would die to protect her. He grit his teeth angrily. He couldn't do anything except just hold her there, rubbing her back and whispering soothing words. Her body wasn't shaking nearly as bad as they sat there, the concept of time a foreign thought for the moment. Maka shifted back a little and Soul loosened his grip around her to look down. You alright now? Tears were still trailing down her rube-scent cheeks, but she nodded. Thank you, Soul, Maka trailed off as she took a deep breath in. You probably saw it, didn't you? That thing invading my mind, my body, my soul. I can still feel it. It's not there anymore, so don't worry. Besides, we took down that creepy 𝐒𝐻𝐽 no problem. 𝗧𝗏 gave her a toothy grin and she smiled softly. 'Cause you got the greatest 𝗬𝗧𝗏 ever as your partner? What would I ever do without the coolest guy in the world? 𝗵𝗲 wiped her face with the backs of her hands, sniffling as she dried her tears. Although the pain woke her up, exhaustion still dragged over the meister with iron weights. Now there was the lasting soreness of suddenly jerking every muscle and tendon attached to the injured ribs. Probably be stuck with some loser who hasn't defeated 𝐒𝐻𝐽, got a cool chest scar, got a killer motorcycle, became a 𝗬𝗧𝗏. 𝗧𝗏 ticked off the list on his fingers, closing one eye and keeping the other on her. Traveled the world kicking ass, hasn't defeated witches or the 𝐒𝐻𝐽. Has a best friend who is the Shinigami. Great hair, can't forget that. And has the strongest meister in the world. Hard to be awesome like me, right? Should I keep going? I think that's plenty enough, 𝗧𝗏. You've made your point to the only person even listening. 𝗵𝗲 laughed as he gave her another toothy grin, his white locks messy falling across his eyes. With a gentle touch she pushed them back, revealing those devious red eyes she loved so much. His hair had gotten a little long again, white tendrils falling over his face. She wondered if he just hadn't had the time to put a headband on to tame them. His hand came up to encase the one resting against his face, red eyes searching green. 𝗵𝗲 felt her heart nearly beating out of her chest as a deeply concealed emotion began shining forth. There would be no more hiding their feelings, keeping them locked up deep within their souls while putting on a facade on the outside. How long had she wanted this but been too terrified of rejection or being hurt? And there were the other girls clamoring to be his partner for so long, all flocking to him whenever he was at school. Usually 𝗵𝗲 was roughly pushed aside by the clamoring teens, totally ignored. With a huff she would leave, leaving 𝗧𝗏 to dig his way out of the horde of hormones while she went to class. But now that they were here alone, with her feelings finally out in the open, the meister felt like crying all over again. Her eyes slid closed on her own, body instinctively leaning forward. 𝗵𝗲 was interrupted as the door flung open once more, startling the two apart. It was the older front desk attendant who hurried in, the one who'd prepared their meals and changed her clothes while she was healing, wringing her hands in front of her. 𝗧𝗏 instantly looked for something interesting to stare at, avoiding look in their direction. "Oh, my sweet girl, are you alright? I heard you yell out and then he came sprinting in and I haven't heard anything since. I was so worried." The woman blubbered as she crushed 𝗵𝗲 in a bear hug. "You are so young, poor girl. My daughter, you resemble her. I'm sorry to hear that. You can rest easy knowing no one else will suffer the way your child and many others did." 𝗵𝗲 winced against the woman's shoulder as her ribs were shifted, pleading eyes trailing back to 𝗧𝗏 who was sprawled out on the floor. He appeared a little surprised but kept his face mainly neutral. 𝗵𝗲 felt her heart drop into her stomach as he got up and hesitated before leaving the room, right hand scratching the back of his head and his left shoved deep in a pocket, muttering something under his breath. He paused and shot her a quick, flustered look. It was apprehension mainly, but there was something else, shame? She wasn't sure how long she'd been sitting there nearly being crushed by the larger woman, but everything body felt numb and disconnected from reality. 𝗵𝗲 didn't even think to see if he reciprocated the feelings, just instinctively moving with what she felt was right. 𝗧𝗏 kept his emotions under tight lock and key for the most part, meaning even if she wanted to check, it was impossible to peek into the familiar soul. But surely having just gained sudden access to all her thoughts and feelings, he would align with them? The next few hours were a blur. The only sensation she remembered was scalding hot water cascading over her body, steam filling her vision as something moved roughly against her skin. Someone was speaking to her in a gentle voice, but 𝗵𝗲 couldn't hear it. Her heart felt like it had stopped beating altogether. Were things ruined between her and 𝗧𝗏? Why did he look like he regretted it? Tears silently intermingled with the beads of flowing warmth. "Dear, your ride is here. You should get going now." A soft voice drew the meister from her numbness, and she turned hazy eyes to the woman. They were standing in the main hall of the inn, no longer in the showers. "Forgive me for ruining your moment together. I was very concerned about you and was afraid something bad had happened. I apologize for causing tension between you both. If he truly loves you like I see he does, you shall have your perfect moment." The woman, who 𝗵𝗲 learned was named Nadia, looked at her with love, though there were tears welling in her eyes. A twinge flitted across her heart, and before she knew it, she was sobbing in the woman's arms. All the fear, anxiety, pent-up emotions rushed out, and she wailed into the warm shoulder. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 cried as well, holding the fragile girl in her arms, wanting to keep her safe and sound. The moment ended when 𝗧𝗪 interrupted with a throat clearing. "Our ride's here, let's go." 𝗧𝗪 nodded his head towards the door, his voice neutral as he grabbed their bags and walked into the frigid cold without a second look back. Maka yearned for his gaze to stay more than a moment, yet it never would. Crimson would always divert to the side or close until he turned around. He wouldn't bring anything up apart from mission-related information, even with prying from the nervous meister. "Trust me, sweetheart, you will know when you are ready. Take care and thank you." 𝗧𝗵𝗲 placed a soft kiss against Maka's forehead before releasing her and pushing her towards the door. "Now go. Return to your homeland while we begin our rebuilding here." "Thank you, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Take care." Maka turned and headed outside, resisting the urge to look back. The chance of ever seeing the wonderful, kind woman were slim to none. Seeing as her own mother had disappeared out of her life, Maka took comfort in the stranger. They may have only known each other for a few days, but 𝗧𝗵𝗲 seemed to care immensely for the meister. The harsh wind smacked Maka in the face, and she blinked back the sudden stinging, the cold taking hold of her petite frame with a death grip. There was a local police force officer waiting on the two 𝗬𝗵𝗲 students to shuttle them back to the airport 30 minutes away in the next town over. 𝗧𝗪 was currently securing down their suitcases, tightening the straps with a little more force than necessary on the trailer attached to the snowmobile. The two locked eyes for a moment, mixed feelings shooting between them. Maka broke first, her face heating up as she looked away, ashamed. If she hadn't been injured in the first place, they wouldn't be having such awkward tension. Her fist clenched tightly at her side as she willed the tears to stay put. "If you two are ready, we must go. There is another storm building up, and if we don't get out of here now, we'll be hit." The officer yelled over the wind with a thick accent. "Let's go, Maka." 𝗧𝗪 spoke barely above the wind, already moving towards the snowmobile without a second glance. It was like he wanted nothing to do with her anymore. Everything was her fault. She never should have released the lock on her thoughts. Never should have blindly, wholeheartedly believed that 𝗧𝗪 loved her like she loved him. Maka sullenly shuffled her way to the vehicle, mind swirling with turbulent thoughts as she swung her leg over and sat behind 𝗧𝗪. Her hands instinctively reached to wrap around his waist, though this time they froze and slowly retracted to hold onto the handles on the side. If he noticed, he didn't say anything and just kept looking forward. Maka kept her head down as they took off, and her back bumped into the metal bars of the seat, yet she ignored the throbbing pain as her jaw clenched. Holding on to 𝗧𝗪 normally prevented the jerking of his rough acceleration. Tears slipped down her face as they traversed through the fine white powder, the wind whipping viciously around them at the high rate of speed. Would he find her annoying and want to change partners? Was it because she was still too flat-chested? She'd tried those new push-up bras from downtown Death City, though really all that did was make her feel like a walking billboard. Blair tried to help the inexperienced, blossoming woman by taking her to 𝗵𝗵𝗲 to see how her co-workers dressed, though as soon as she saw the lazy death scythe of a father crowded by scantily dressed women, Maka promptly turned on her heel and stormed home frustrated. The snowmobile slowed to a stop, and the meister tiredly lifted her head to see they'd arrived at the airport, sans snowstorm. In the time her mind was preoccupied. "Maka, let's go, you alright?" 𝗧𝗪 started but stopped when he noticed the fresh tracks down her cheeks, her glassy eyes unfocused. His heart thumped irregularly at the sight of his broken meister. "What's wrong? Are you in pain again? You must leave, otherwise the pilot cannot take off in the strong winds." The officer yelled to the duo, drawing 𝗧𝗪's attention. "The storms in Russia are merciless. Please, board while I get your bags for you." 𝗧𝗪 turned his attention back to Maka, who was already headed towards the small plane steps, gloved hands swiping at her face. He let out a frustrated sigh and wiped his hand down his face. Fuck. He'd screwed up royally this time. But what the hell was he supposed to do? His meister just started leaning in with eyes fluttering shut. Either she was about to faint or heat rushed the tundra-scraped face. Was she really about to? Just like in the Black Room? The link between them remained tightly sealed off after the nightmare episode, preventing him from digging deeper into the matter. Tugging the scarf over his nose, 𝗏𝗏 begrudgingly followed his meister onto the plane with thoughts firing 100 miles a second. This was going to be a long flight back. It was a silent walk down the long, portrait-filled hallway as they headed towards the death room, the meister weapon duo standing over a foot apart. Maka kept her expression neutral as she walked with hands clasped behind her back, normal pigtails abandoned for a loose, low ponytail. It was highly unlike her to leave the infamous pigtails out, but the meister had been acting weird since they arrived back in Death City just barely a week ago. Barely leaving her room, refusing to eat, not even picking up her favorite book that lay haphazardly discarded on the living room table. Blair had to help her shower since Maka didn't have the energy to get out of bed. Even when invited by the girls to go shopping, the meister hesitantly agreed and apparently trailed slowly behind the rest of them, zoning out and being non-responsive to conversation. 𝗏𝗏 glanced at his meister with a frown. Since that incident in Russia, she hadn't been herself. He'd tried to link to her soul, but it had been sealed off again. He couldn't help but feel like it was his fault. Even though he'd seen the conversation she and 𝗏𝗏 had, heard her feelings, watched her eyes close as she started leaning in. Was it because she didn't get the reaction she'd hoped for? Or because he didn't reciprocate and did nothing but freeze up with wide eyes? The door swung open as they neared, revealing the long line of torii gates, aligned perfectly straight into the death room. A tall figure was waiting just inside the door, leaning against the first gate with a serious expression and arms crossed. It didn't take but a moment to recognize the normally rambunctious and boastful meister. "Yo, Black Star. What's with the serious look?" 𝗏𝗏 bumped fists with the ninja, receiving only a head nod in return. Immediately the weapon dropped the friendly tone and switched to business mode. "I've never seen you this stoic. That bad. It's about that ninja clan just north of where we were, isn't it?" Maka suddenly spoke up, startling the weapon slightly. She'd barely spoken, so her tone was raspy and low. "I can see it in your soul wavelength. Tsubaki told me on the flight back." She looked into it more and dug up some old stories and rumors. Seems that clan is notorious for messing with powerful witches and creating monsters. They vanished off the map over 800 years ago for no reason. No one's heard of them since. Black Star filled them in as they walked through the gates. Kid seems to think the two are connected with Azura's sealing and defeat years ago. It's possible that since the madness was released all over the world that it signaled for them to start back up. Great. So more psycho people are being born and rampaging the world. And here I thought one overpowered 𝗏𝗏 was bad enough. 𝗏𝗏 muttered as he shoved his hands in his pockets, grimacing at nothing in particular. A bad feeling was brewing the more they dug into the ninja clan mystery. With the 𝗏𝗏 correlating to the unknown affiliated clan, things could escalate into another war if they didn't stop it. Those things, Black Star, they weren't like any 𝗏𝗏 we've fought. They weren't like Azura. They were hybrids of animals and human souls. Maka whispered as she wrapped her arms around herself, the memory still fresh and haunting. "The one we fought when that ninja was there watching. I couldn't even keep up with its speed. It was breaking 𝗏𝗏 Hunter with its teeth. But when I punched it with my anti-demon wavelength, it exploded like Azura did. When it went after him, it didn't land a single hit. He dodged it like he already knew how it fought." The two men shared a look of concern as Maka kept mumbling on and on about the hybrid 𝗏𝗏, ignorant of the fact that she had continued walking away without either of them. "Something happened to her?" Black Star asked quietly as they hung back for a bit to talk. "That 𝗏𝗏 somehow got into her mind and is screwing with her. I saw it through resonance, and it knew everything about her from her blood type all the way to what she dreams about. I don't have any way to help her out. She won't eat, has barely drank anything since we got back. Hell, Blair had to help her shower because she didn't have the motivation to get up. I'm worried about her." Normally Maka bounces back from things like this, but 𝗏𝗏 watched his meister as she continued on, his heart aching. A heavy hand clapped onto a tense shoulder. "She'll bounce back, Maka always does. Just give her time to figure everything out. It's only been, what? A week? You know how she is." Black Star slapped his hand a few times on his best friend's shoulder. "Something else is bothering you, something that happened between you two. Spill. That noticeable, huh?" 𝗏𝗏 rubbed the back of his neck as he looked down at the ground cloud-covered ground. He didn't take his best friend for the perceptive type when it came to this particular subject. But they'd all changed over the years, so maybe he was finally expanding his narrow horizons. I heard her feelings for me through resonance, and when she woke up and started screaming, "Go and 𝗏𝗏 urged, his full attention on his best friend. I calmed her down and she tried to kiss me. 𝗏𝗧 rushed the last part, his face tinting a light pink as he looked everywhere but the grinning idiot next to him. First mistake. 𝗏𝗏 tended to be obnoxiously loud when it came to his excitement. But the ninja merely put him in a headlock and leaned in closer to be more discreet, much to 𝗏𝗧's surprise. My man, I knew you had the hots for her. Just never thought you'd go for it. How is it? Gimme the deets. 𝗏𝗧 started but was cut off by said woman they were talking about, her voice echoing loudly in the spacious room. Hurry up you two. I want to finish this and get back home. Maka called back to them without stopping or looking back, her shoulders squared. And there was the second mistake. That. Answer your question, 𝗏𝗏? Got interrupted and it's been awkward since. Let's go. I don't want her annoyed any more than she already is. Shit, my bad dude. 𝗏𝗏 released the hold and kept his hands up as 𝗏𝗧 trudged behind the demanding meister. Kid was standing over a table, covered with mission papers and school documents, symmetrically organizing them into two separate neat sides. Liz had her glasses on and was reading over some of them when the trio entered the area. Oh, Maka-soul. Welcome back. The demon weapon looked up and gave the duo a smile, silently noting their unusual distance and tension. Glancing briefly over to 𝗏𝗏, she was given a discreet head jerk to the side. How was Russia? I heard it's super cold up there during the winters. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Frigid, Maka said quickly, impatient to small talk when there was nothing more she wanted than to return to moping around her room. What have you found out about the ninja clan and the hybrid 𝗏𝐭𝐻𝑖ns? Kid carefully set the papers down before turning to greet the duo as well. While the Reaper was thankful to see his friends return fairly unharmed, there was noticeable space between meister and weapon. Maka seemed annoyed and antsy while 𝗏𝗧 just seemed distracted and slightly perturbed. Maka-soul, welcome back. How was the flight back? Are you feeling better? Lum. She's good. Black blood healed her up in no time. What have you got for us, kid? 𝗏𝗧 rushed out before Maka could answer. The meister gave him a strange look, her brow raised up, though the questioning gaze quickly diverted to a random pile of papers on the elongated table. Well, not really much more than 𝗏𝗏 most likely told you. We've been searching some documents Tsubaki sent in from her village regarding the ninja clan. It seems to be a connection between the ninjas and some rogue witches, or so the stories seem to tell. Kid raised a brow to the death scythe, who curtly shook his head, telling him to leave it alone. Anyways, that's all we know for now, though we've been looking through any reports of people suddenly going missing in that area. Seems in the last few years, more than a handful have vanished without a trace after returning with news of their discovery. Tell me everything you know, kid. I'll give you a full rundown of what happened in Annapolis. While Maka dived right in to help, 𝗏𝗧 stood back. He was frustrated and tired to the point it was beginning to be easily noticed by other people. 𝗏𝗏 took action first and dragged the weapon away from prying ears, keeping his fist wrapped around the collar of his shirt. 𝗏𝗧 shot him a nasty look and clamped down on the hand to gain some breathing room. Get your shit together, eater. Or so help me, I'll beat it out of you. You're acting pathetic right now. So what, you didn't get to kiss Maka and now you're upset? Get the fuck over it. It ain't the end of the world, is it? 𝗏𝗏 hissed at the weapon, his eyes narrowed with anger. You're acting like a pansy, it ain't cool, 𝗏𝗧. 𝗏𝗧 knocked 𝗏𝗏's hand from his shirt, giving the ninja a deadly glare, but his friend didn't back down and reaffirmed his stance. It's not just that, asshole. Like, you know what it feels like to be helpless as your partner struggles. Not being able to comfort her, build her back up from the slump she's in. I feel like the one who broke her in the first place. 𝗏𝗧 angrily whispered back, resisting the urge to punch his friend. Both hands clenched and released into fists, shaking with every pounding heartbeat. And there's nothing I can do to fix it without her getting mad at me or hating me. She's locked her feelings up again just as they were being opened for me. For a death scythe, I'm pretty fucking weak and pathetic. 𝗏𝗏 just stood there silently, watching as his friend ruffled his hair in annoyance, looking to be anywhere but there. Over the years, he'd watched the pair grow closer, more so than any other Shibuya team there was, and not even 𝐒𝐻𝐻 could tear them down to where they were now. The ninja just let out a laugh, earning a glare from the weapon. "Let's go. I've got something that'll help you out." "Oi, kid, Maka," Black Star yelled to the chatting Shinigami and Meister. "I'm kidnapping Soul for a few hours, don't wait up." Before Soul could splutter a response, he was quickly being dragged from the death room by the rambunctious ninja who was proclaiming how he was going to cure Soul of his uncool slump. Maka made to reach out for her weapon but quickly diverted it to something else, covering her mistake. Kid raised a brow at the Meister, but chose to ignore it for more important matters. At least they still cared for one another. A small rut in the relationship was better than a complete separation. A few hours passed with little result in progress. The only new information they had was one key witness who watched another villager suddenly act strange before walking towards the forest, unresponsive to anyone. Maka dropped the paper she was looking at to pinch the bridge of her nose. Her eyes were getting tired from staring at small print of the reports. Liz and Patty left to go prepare dinner, and Kid was called away for something important, leaving the Meister all alone in the death room. Stretching her arms high, she felt a satisfying pop inside. Soul hadn't been seen or heard from in hours since Black Star dragged him away to do Shinigami knows what. Worry was beginning to gnaw. Deciding to call it a day, Maka wrote a quick note for Kid and placed it on top of the papers, making sure it was as straight as possible. The walk through the school was quiet. All students had left for the day or were participating in class activities and training. It almost seemed nostalgic walking through the familiar hallways. A tinier version of Maka walking with Soul, lecturing him about not doing his homework again. A smile appeared on her tired face as other memories popped into her mind, the visions playing vividly in the isolated hallway. Her choosing Soul as her partner, collecting their 99th soul, meeting Blair, Soul taking Krona's attack for her, fighting Medusa, Soul becoming a death scythe after eating Arachne's soul, defeating 𝐒𝐻𝐼 with Soul. Maka slowed to a stop. She hadn't realized how much a part of her life he'd become over the years. Nearly everything was done with him attached at the hip. The grocery shopping missions, and on some occasions the bookstore with her. She held her hands out in front of her, staring blankly at gloved palms. How did she function without him? How could she function without him? He was her other half, completing her soul, mind, and body. So why was she being such an idiot and pushing him away over something neither could control at that moment? Maka felt like the world's biggest idiot as she sniffled, covering her eyes with her arm. "Look at what you've done now, Albern, pushing Soul Senpai away like the cruel woman I know you are." A small voice spoke up, quickly drawing Maka back to focus. Not even Soul Perception had picked up the sudden presence of another student. It was that younger year, whose name she never learned, who stalked her in Soul, even tormenting her in the sloth chapter of the Book of Iban. There she was, standing just a few feet from her with hands on both hips as she stared mockingly at the Meister. Tight red curls swaying on either side of her head as she cocked her head a little. Cruel? A little ironic coming from someone who continues to torture and harass me. Maka shot back at the girl spitefully. She was in no mood to deal with that kind of stuff right now. She needed to get to Soul, to tell him everything, to apologize, to kiss him hard enough until they both ran out of breath. "I'm doing nothing more than pointing out your obvious flaws as a Meister and partner. Nothing more, nothing less. Soul would be so much better with a partner like me." She pointed a delicate hand to her chest, to which Maka scoffed. "I would never abuse and harass him like you tend to do quite often. You just like to be bossy and demanding, taking charge of every situation because you think you know what's best. But what about all those times Soul had to intervene because you lost control and started getting reckless? Perhaps you'd like a few reminders." With a snap of her fingers, the hallway transformed into the snowy bridge in London. It was the battle of Free the Werewolf and Black Star, Tsubaki, Maka, and Soul. The latter of the group were arguing about their souls not connecting due to each other's faults. Soul transformed, and as Maka caught him, her hands began to burn, so she dropped him. The battle continued on with the Meister holding onto her weapon, his shaft badly burning her hands as she recklessly charged the immortal. At one point she tosses him aside and tackles the werewolf, both going over the edge of the bridge. By sheer luck, Soul caught her by the ankle, preventing her from a certain icy death hundreds of feet below. A snap of her fingers transformed the surroundings into Florence, Italy, inside of the Santa Maria Novella Basilica. There she watched a younger version of herself trapped in the church with 𝗏, her back to the door as he launched at her, Ragnarok swinging down fast. A flash of light and soul had transformed back to human form, taking the hit for her. Blood flew everywhere, flying high into the air as delicate flesh was ripped open. Maka grit her teeth at the memory. His scar was an everyday reminder of her biggest failure. Another snap and they were outside of Shibuya, in the streets of Death City. A loud explosion rocked the air as 𝐒𝐻𝑒𝐽 shot from beneath the ground, scattering debris everywhere as he ascended to the sky. Maka, the younger one, was struck in the head and lost consciousness, beginning to fall towards the ground. Soul yelling out as he transformed, using his body as a cushion behind hers. They slammed into the fruit cart conveniently placed in the perfect spot. Maka could hear Soul grunt as he tried to sit up, her younger self reaching towards the cushion before falling into darkness. This time it was the labyrinth of Medusa, when she had a maddened Stein under her control. Maka snapped and flew at the witch with the hatred of 1,000 suns, swinging her scythe down with fury. Her recklessness nearly cost the life of Rachel, the little girl Medusa had taken over while she recovered from losing her original body. She refused to listen to Marie as well, blatantly disobeying an order from a teacher. Thanks to her recklessness, 𝗏 sacrificed himself to save Maka, nearly dying in the end. Over and over the scenes switched, showing the dozens of events where the Meister had lost control and had gotten herself or Soul seriously injured. Even 𝗏 was injured in some of the battles, thanks to Maka. Her jaw was clenched so tightly it popped when it shifted. Haven't you realized yet? Your blatant recklessness and disregard for the safety of others is the reason people are getting injured to save you. You're not a good Meister. You're a manipulative, sneaky, low-life, weak, insecure woman who uses others to protect yourself. Enough. Maka snarled out as she closed the distance between the two, her mature form towering over the small girl. I've had enough of you nitpicking every single flaw I have. Yes, I have put people in danger. Yes, I've been the reason Soul has been injured. Yes, I've lost control of myself more times than I can count. But you know what? I survived. Soul survived. All of the others have survived. I created a new 𝗧𝗪, the last 𝗧𝗪, because I kept going. Because when I was weak, Soul was there to pick me up. When he got injured because of me, it killed me inside for the longest time and it still haunts me to this day. If things had turned out differently, I may not be here, Soul may not be here, nor the others. Fate may be sick, it may be twisted, but Shinigami above us all, it has led to those specific events becoming aligned. They were meant to happen because of the choices I made. The girl stared up at her in shock, her mouth flapping open and closed as the outburst froze her brain. But the Meister wasn't done just yet with her. Running a hand over the top of sandy locks, Maka ripped the ponytail out and began splitting the hairs with practiced ease. A second hair tie wrapped around a petite wrist slid off and constrained the second batch of locks. Swinging them lightly, confidently, the Meister raised her chin, placed a hand against her thrumming heart, and took in a deep breath. And you know what? Screw it. I'm in love with Soul Eater Evans, my partner. I have been for years, but I've been too terrified of getting hurt to do anything but lock the feelings down deep inside my soul. I know your obsession with him is cute and all, but he is mine, now and forever. If you want to challenge me, then so be it. Come at me with everything you've got. Her soul perception tingled and Maka took a step back in surprise. The girl in front of her was no longer frozen in fear. Her soul was expanding at a sudden rate that pushed even Maka back a good 10 feet. It wasn't a normal soul either, one filled with sinister intent and even the familiar, creeping tendrils of darkness that 𝗓𝗪 spread across the globe. Yours forever, you say? Well, there won't be a forever if you're killed by a witch without your weapon. The girl cackled as she threw both arms out wide while her body began to transform with a swirl of power. Maka took another step back, eyes narrowing in calculation as the young girl that was standing not even 2 feet away suddenly became a full-grown woman. Red, tightly curled tendrils exploded into long wavy locks that trailed past her hips and nearly touched the tile flooring before twisting themselves into 2 thick braids. A tight black dress seemed to pool around the floor, the fabric seemingly moving under the fluorescent lights before shrinking to skin-tight stockings. Her body grew into that of a curvaceous woman with plump assets, jiggling chest nearly overflowing from the top of the fitted dress. A large black hat adorned the top of her blood-red locks, the flaps curling upwards, giving it an almost eerie smile. Long black gloves exposed her inches-long nails, making them seem even deadlier. "Finally showing your true colors now, aren't we?" Maka breathed as she scanned the hallway for an escape. A witch. In Shibuya. Their treaty with the witches was still valid, as verified by the signed document between Kid and Maba. This one must have been in hiding to wait for the opportunity to ripen. As small of a chance as it was, she could be related to the ninja clan and Kishin incident in Russia. Years of wandering down every hallway and corridor in the school, Maka had memorized every level in the building, including the notorious basement where Marie continued to get lost. From where she currently stood, dodging right was option one, as it would lead to a main corridor of the school farthest from the main entrance, near the library. If she were to go left, it would take her towards the main office and eventually the front door. If she were to go backwards, it would lead to the dead end of the death room. The problem was there were probably still students in the building, and without knowing for sure, innocent meisters and weapons could get wrapped up in the battle. Taking a deep breath, Maka slowly exhaled as she released soul perception over the entirety of the whole school. There were a handful of students left, though it seemed like they were preparing to leave for the evening. Stein was in his lab, Marie in the joining room next to the lab with Hiroaki. Kid was nowhere to be sensed, meaning Liz and Patty were most likely not in the building either. Tsubaki had left earlier to head home and prepare dinner for her and Black Star. She could see Black Star's obnoxious soul from 30 miles away in Seoul. "So, tell me, what's your purpose of disguising yourself as a student in the DWMA? Surely not just to stalk Seoul and harass me?" Maka asked with a guarded tone, Emerald watching the witch's movements cautiously. "Azura is gone, Medusa and Arachne are gone. Why go through all this trouble for just one person? How does it benefit whatever plan you have?" The witch laughed with a smirk on her dark red lips, maroon eyes dancing. "Very observant of you. Your power, Maka Alburn, is a threat to us witches. Myself especially, considering I carry the blood of Arachne and Medusa within my body, both of whom you have destroyed alongside the overflowing madness of Azura. How could you possibly carry the blood of both Medusa and Arachne? Unless you're another sibling they failed to mention." Maka spat out as she shifted her right foot back. She would make a run for the front door. A battle inside could cause it collapse and crush anyone inside. By then someone was sure to notice what was happening and rush to assist. Yet right now, sans a death scythe, Maka Alburn was at a major disadvantage, even if she ran through the entirety of Death City. "Dear child," the witch cooed as she aimed an open palm to the meister. "I am the creator of the infamous Gorgon sisters, Arachne, Medusa, and Shala, the powerful and unrelenting witch Ametrine, mother of the coven, and destroyer of soul perception-abled meisters." Black Star had dragged Soul through town, stopping at the Death Side's favorite shops. The record store, arcade, death cafe, and even to the town fountain to relax with some ice cream afterwards. Whatever he could do to ease the love-troubled mind of his best friend, he did, including picking a fight with some younger years who mocked the ninja for his iconic hairstyle. That seemed to pull a bit of a smile from the stoic white-haired weapon. While it wasn't much, it was the best Black Star could do for the moment. "You feeling better yet? 'Cause if you aren't, I'll kick your ass until you do," Black Star asked before shoving his entire ice cream cone in his mouth, the end sticking out as he chewed. "Yeah, thanks. Guess it was a cool idea after all." Soul gave the ninja a toothy grin before taking a bite out of his ice cream cone. The break away from the tension was just what he needed. It also gave him plenty of time to think of what to do next regarding his isolating meister. "I should probably just sit down with Maka and talk to her about it after all. Weird taking love advice from someone like you. A god like me not knowing about love? My poor son, I have so much to teach you." Black Star dramatically placed the back of his hand against his temple as he spoke. After a few moments, he shoved the backup ice cream cone into his mouth and aggressively chewed it to bits. "Even a god like me can snatch a woman with ease, but Tsubaki has always been there for me, supporting me, even when I've been a complete asshole." Love her that much, do you? Soul teased as he finished off his cone. Yeah, I can't imagine life without her, Soul. I'm one lucky asshole to receive such a goddess like her. Black Star flushed and nervously scratched the back of his head. Oh shit, I forgot she was making dinner tonight. I gotta go, Soul. Let me know how it goes with Maka. Just talk it out. The ninja shot up and gave a quick two-finger wave before leaping to the rooftops. Soul shook his head at the ridiculous ninja before standing. With a quick stretch, he strolled over to his motorcycle and swung a leg over. His pride and joy started with ease, roaring to life as he revved the engine. A group of Shibuyan girls, first years it appeared, spotted him and began calling out to him. Before they could even take a step, he was off, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The weapon grimaced in annoyance. The peck of hormones was worse now that he'd become a 𝗧𝗵𝗲, following him everywhere and pushing Maka out of the way when they were at school. That was the part that pissed him off. They just shoved her aside like she was nothing, like she didn't exist. Usually she just left with a huff, leaving Soul to deal with the horde. The last time it happened, though, Maka looked defeated as she left with her arms hanging down by her sides. Once she was gone, Soul had let loose on the girls, chewing them out for being inconsiderate and mean. Some of them got the message, while others continued their pursuit, especially the red-haired one. Though he rarely seemed to notice, Maka always did, sensing the girl's soul immediately. Reserved, never approaching directly, choosing to lurk in the shadows and spy on him constantly with a heated gaze. He wondered how his partner never gave in and Maka chopped her on the head, though at least there was some restraint considering the girl was a first year. Or was it second? Soul wondered if Maka was back at the apartment yet. It had been at least 3 hours since Black Star dragged him around, so surely they were nearing done with the paperwork. Blair said she'd be working late tonight, so that just left the two alone in the apartment. It would give them a chance to talk things over without the nosy, perverted cat intervening. The bright orange motorcycle revved loudly as it sped up, headed towards its destination with renewed vigor. Maka had chosen the right direction. She flung herself left just as a massive blast from 𝗵𝗲𝗄 collapsed the ceiling over the right hallway. With a quick roll, the meister was on her feet again and sprinting down the hallway as fast as she could go. There would be casualties if she stayed inside the academy for much longer. Luckily, there weren't any students on this side of the building, so she didn't have to worry about that as she slid around a corner, boots gliding across the tiled floors with ease. She could feel her approaching fast behind her. With a growl, Maka zigzagged her way through the hallways, swinging around corners as tight and fast as she could to get an edge. An explosion went off behind her, propelling her body through the air with a powerful aftershock. She braced as she landed, hitting her shoulder hard against the floor before tumbling into a wall. The wind was knocked from her lungs as her back connected with the obstacle. You can run, sweet girl, but you won't get far. You're going against the most powerful witch there is alive. My children's powers, they weren't even 50% of what I can do. And that was combined. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 fired another blast of magic, hitting just above the meister's head. Her maroon eyes seemed to swirl with darkness as she cornered Maka with a haughty grin. What can you do without your beloved 𝗬𝗪𝗧 to save you? You're nothing but a useless little girl right now. If you're anything like Arachne and Medusa, Maka coughed as she forced herself to her feet, bracing against the wall as she turned narrowed, determined emerald eyes to her attacker. Her lips ticked upwards into a cocky grin, eliciting a growl from the flaming witch. Then you'll be just as easy to defeat. I don't need a 𝗬𝗪𝗧 to know that. _B_. Kid sat down in the massive dining room at his estate, lost in thought. There was something not quite adding up and he couldn't for the life of him figure it out. Why would the witches be connected to a hidden clan of ninjas deep in the Russian mountains? If they were working together, why would they create hybrid 𝐒𝐭𝐻𝑖ns? 𝐒𝐻𝑒𝐴 could be a factor in the sudden awakening of a pre-𝐒𝐿, but for what true purpose would they be doing it? None of it was making sense, and it was driving the Shinigami insane. He'd been pulled aside from his research earlier to assist in a matter regarding a possible spy within the academy. He was handed an envelope with the suspected person written on it, but was warned not to open it until he arrived back at his house to prevent wandering eyes from reading it. Liz and Patty were messing around in the kitchen to prepare dinner, so it gave Kid the perfect opportunity to read the letter in peace. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the slightly creased letter. With a fingernail, he sliced open the envelope and gingerly pulled out the letter from within. As he lifted it up, a picture floated to the tabletop, landing face up. Kid glanced down to study it and paused. Was it possible? Inspecting the photo closer, he noticed some odd trinkets on the person. A snake necklace adorned their neck, while one earring was a spider and the other was a scorpion. He tore his gaze from the picture to the folded letter in his hands. Within seconds, it was open, his golden eyes quickly scanning the lines of information. Damn it! The resemblance! How did I not figure it out until now? Kid cursed under his breath as he threw the letter down and shot up from his chair, racing into the kitchen as fast as he could. The paper landed haphazardly over the photograph. A crimson eye and the spider earring were all that remained visible. Liz, Patty, we're leaving now. 𝗏 rolled to a stop before killing the engine. It looked like no one was home yet. The only light on was the living room lamp. The weapon leaned forward on his bike, letting his head fall onto his outstretched arms. How was he supposed to straighten things out if she wasn't even home? Man, nothing was going to plan this week. Maybe he could stop by and ask Blair if she'd seen or heard anything from the meister. Never mind, that was a terrible idea. He'd only get dragged into the club where Maka's degenerate father resided 90% of the time, then get berated for being a scum weapon who visited host clubs with scantily clad women. Spirit still didn't trust him fully even after defeating 𝐒𝐻𝐼. Maybe a bribery gift would work. A new book? Wait, what books did she like again? Were they fiction or non? She'd already filled her room and the living room with 1,000 flammable paper slabs. Adding to the problem wasn't the solution. Leaning back to look up at fading sunlight, 𝗏 let out a sigh of frustration. All those years and one stupid thing was straining their relationship. How lame was that? Deciding it was best to just go back to the 𝗬𝗓𝗍, the bike roared to life when the weapon noticed something shooting across the sky. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be a small, unmanned drone of sorts. 𝗏 knew what it was all too well. Wherever he was going, it was in a hurry. Where is Kid going at this time of night? Red eyes followed the line of sight the Shinigami was heading towards and felt his heart skip a beat. He was headed back to the school at a high rate of speed. An explosion resounded through the air, and thick black smoke began to rise from the roof of 𝗬𝗪𝗓 a moment later. Maka. The tires squealed as 𝗏 went full throttle down the cobblestone street towards Black Star's apartment. If something big was about to go down, they'd need backup. It took barely a minute to reach the ninja's apartment, and 𝗏 slammed down on the brakes, creating an ear-splitting screech comparable to nails on a chalkboard. He didn't need to yell for the meister to come out. As soon as 𝗏 stopped, the familiar blue hair was peeking out of the living room window with a piece of bread between his lips. 𝗏? What's going on? Kid just took off towards the school. Something's going on. There's been an explosion. Maka isn't home either, 𝗏 shouted over the roar of his bike. I'll meet you there, go. The ninja didn't need told twice as he turned his head into the apartment and yelled for 𝗧𝗵𝗲. 𝗏 didn't wait for the two as he revved the engine once more and spun the bike around before taking off. People littering the sleepy streets jumped out of the way with outcries, shouting at him for driving like a maniac. 𝗏 didn't care. Maka was still in the school that now billowed smoke high into the dwindling afternoon sky. Damn it, Maka, be safe until I get there. Kid, what's going on? Why are we in such a hurry to the school? Liz asked frantically as they flew over Death City. Most of its residents were enjoying their dinner around this time or strolling through the town center to wind down for the day. He wanted it to stay that way. The threat at the school needed to be handled swiftly. Kid had told them to immediately transform and rushed from the house, giving no explanation for the emergency. Thankfully, they hadn't turned on the stove yet, saving them the worry of the house burning down or exploding while they were gone. But now the worry was of the enormous soul expanding through the smoke and debris of the school his father worked so hard to build. A school that taught and nurtured highly skilled meisters and weapons, a vital life force in preserving the balance of the world. There's a spy within 𝗬𝗪𝗓, a witch. I have reason to believe she's related to Arachne and Medusa. If it's anything like it was years ago, they'll be targeting Maka for her strong soul perception ability. Kid explained while forcing himself faster. A perk of being a Shinigami was the lack of need for a skateboard. And if it is like that, then Maka is without soul right now and going against a witch who could be stronger than either, alone or combined. Soul hasn't come back yet? Shouldn't he still be with Black Star? Liz asked anxiously. The thought of the distracted and stressed Meister alone against a powerful witch had her quivering with worry. Kid, this is serious. If Maka's alone without a weapon then? I know, Liz, but I'm sure by now he's on his way to the school with Black Star. Hard to miss a Shinigami flying through the sky. Kid mused lightly before his facial expression slipped back to serious, his black Shinigami cloak flapping angrily in the wind. He could already feel the three souls beginning to diverge towards the school. No doubt the teachers had heard the explosions and were beginning evacuations. This could be a major battle depending on the witch's strength. Even Arachne and Medusa were a tough battle, but someone possibly a lot stronger than the two combined spelled for a disaster, especially for a Meister without her weapon at the ready. Kid, look. Patty suddenly called out, causing the Shinigami to look down. A massive plume of black smoke erupted from the roof of the school, rapidly darkening the surrounding sky. Fire began to lick at the building as Kid grit his teeth and armed the sibling death weapons in front of him, ready to launch himself through the school walls. A massive soul wavelength smacked full force into him and he faltered briefly, eyes growing wide. Unbelievable, he whispered in disbelief. This soul wavelength is enormous, nearly as large as Azura's was. No, it's still growing larger. Liz, Patty, prepare yourselves, this is going to get messy real fast. Kid growled as he landed on the ground outside of the main entrance. Kid, what's going on? Where's Maka? A voice called out to the Shinigami from behind, causing the Reaper to look back. I've just arrived, Soul, but it seems she's battling a witch currently. A very powerful one, too. Kid called over his shoulder to Soul as he rushed to his side, panting. I have reason to believe she's related to Arachne and Medusa. What? There's another one of those freaks. Soul growled with a swipe against his mouth. Wonder if she's the one in cahoots with that ninja clan in Russia. Black Star threw in as he landed silently beside Kid. Tsubaki in Shadow Star, Chain of Blackness form. Guess we'll find out soon enough. Here they come, get ready. Kid warned as he sensed Maka's soul moving rapidly towards them. He narrowed his eyes. She was moving too fast for it to be natural. The front of the school suddenly exploded, shooting debris over the waiting Meisters and any lingering students. A large red blur of an object flew from the middle of the explosion, heading straight up into the sky at a high rate of speed. As the dust and smoke cleared, it revealed a witch holding Maka by the throat, the Meister scratching at her captor's arms desperately. Maka! Soul screamed as he transformed his right arm into a blade, crimson eyes blazing with fury as they narrowed at the enemy. Let her go. Now. I'm going to rip you to shreds and devour your soul, witch. Soul Eater Evans, looking at me with such passion. Maka's told me so much about you. The witch purred as she brushed a long lock from her cheek, giving the weapon a once-over before turning her attention to the rest of the company with Maka squirming under the tight grip against her throat. Oh, Shinigami. I didn't see you there. What a pleasure to finally meet you. Let her go before I slice your arm off. Black Star yelled out, successfully diverting her attention his way. Damned witch, I'll kill you. Liz, Patty, ready secondary form in case I need to switch to Soul. Kid growled as he readied his stance, preparing to release the lines of Sanzu to their fullest extent if need be. Whatever he needed to do in order to save his friend. Death Cannon, charged and ready. Patty chirped from her weapon form. Got it, Kid. Liz and Patty nodded to one another. If Kid needed a death scythe, it was about to become a serious battle. Soul, I want you to get Maka out of here as soon as she is cleared. She's most likely not in any condition to fight. Kid ordered his friend, eyes never leaving the levitating witch. Like hell I will. I'll kill her myself for hurting Maka. Soul clenched his jaw as he watched his Meister beginning to tire, the lack of oxygen pulling her in and out of darkness. She can't hold out much longer. This needs to be ended now, Kid. That was always the plan. Ametrine mocked a curtsy to Kid, a bemused smile on her lips. Kid tensed as he studied the witch. Her wavelength was immense, larger than Azura's, and it nearly drowned his own with it. She was toying with them. Kid thought as he glanced over to Black Star. The ninja looked like he was about to use his shadow clone technique to grab Maka. Black tendrils slowly began slithering across the concrete to achieve a better angle. You know who I am, but I have yet to make your acquaintance, witch? Oh, such a formal gentleman you are. Ahem. Ametrine cleared her throat for a grand announcement. Greetings, Shinigami. My name is Ametrine, esteemed mother of the Coven of Witches. Mother to Arachne, Medusa, and Shala. But I'm quite sure you've met them already. Which, Ametrine, I suggest you release my friend there, lest you have a wish to be buried within Death City. Kid cut straight to the chase. His voice was frigid as he eyed her carefully for sudden movements. You must be pretty brave to attack a high-ranking meister within the DWMA, but you've made the mistake of doing it under my watch. There is a time and place to act cordial, and unfortunately for you, this is neither. For now, this is nothing more than a social call. Oh, don't give me such a stink eye. No one was killed in our little talk, though the poor girl refused to give up and she was roughed up a bit. She did insult me first, just so you know, but she's alive for now. I wouldn't dare start a war here, in a city where there are so many meisters and 𝗏𝗧𝗍𝗏s to come after me. Sugar dripped from every word that slipped past plumped lips, a hint of venom underlying the sweet coating as she pouted. She cast a nearly bored look at the fainted meister within her grip. Besides, I've got bigger plans for her than just tossing her around a bit. But I suppose you'll find out about that once everything gets in motion. Give her back. Black Star snarled as he shot towards the witch, shooting his shadow chain towards her hand. It connected and he pulled hard. The witch cocked an eyebrow before tossing the meister aside and effortlessly sending a blast of her soul wavelength through the chain and into his body. The ninja slammed through the walls of Shibuzen with a thundering crash. Soul sprinted forward to catch Maka, leaping to connect with her midair as they both went crashing into the ground. He could feel parts of his arms and back tearing open through his leather jacket as he slid across the concrete. They slid to a stop nearly 20 feet away, the battle now raging on in front of them. With a grunt, Soul sat up. Maka clutched tightly against his chest as he tried to get his bearings. Black Star launched towards the witch. Tsubaki transformed into Leaf of the Moonlit Night, while Kid readied his death cannon to fire. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, let's go. Kid yelled as the weapons began to charge into the heaviest blast version of the death cannon. Soul, get her out of here. Don't die. Soul yelled out as he tightened Maka against his chest and made to run down towards the stairs before stopping. Give her something from me, will ya? Kid smirked at the request but nodded nonetheless, turning his attention back to the battle. As Soul ran down the stairs, he could hear the battle intensifying with the sounds of a cannon going off. He put all of his faith in them to take down the witch, the one who badly hurt his partner. Just from glancing at her, Soul couldn't tell if they were small wounds or not beneath the thick layer of blood. Her normally pristine white and blue school uniform was torn and tattered, leaving mere scraps to cover her body. Damn it, I should have just stayed with her. She wouldn't be injured right now if I had. The weapon stumbled as he felt the ground shake, nearly throwing them both from the massive set of stairs. His bike was waiting for him at the bottom, still running from when he arrived in a panic. With ease, he straddled Maka on the front of the seat, keeping one arm around her as he cautiously swung his leg over to sit behind her. He could feel the blood soaking through his white shirt as he held her still body against his. Carefully, with one arm holding her, he slipped off his beat-up leather jacket and wrapped it around her as best he could to cover up the tattered clothing. Another explosion rocked the city, and Soul looked back in time to see the witch shooting higher into the sky, her red locks wrapped protectively around her body as Black Star barraged her with attacks. It looked like she was just on the defensive. If she was as powerful as she seemed to be, then she could have crushed both Kid and Black Star with ease by now. Perhaps that wasn't her goal for the time being. This could just be the warning as mentioned. Soul, what's going on? A wheezing voice pulled his gaze away from the witch, and he turned to see Spirit rushing over to him. The 𝗏𝗧𝗍𝗏's jacket was wrinkled, and his tie was loose, indicating he was off having fun at 𝗏𝗵𝗲. Apparently, the explosions drew him from the depressing corner of his favorite booth. There was a witch undercover in the school, and she targeted Maka. Kid and Black Star are fighting her now. Soul quickly filled him in, his grip on Maka tightening as the 𝗏𝗧𝗍𝗏 moved his gaze to his daughter. Some father he was, showing up only when things had gone beyond the threshold of bad. Go back up, Kid. I've got to get Maka urgent medical attention. Spirit puffed up and looked like he was about to retort when Soul kicked the bike off, peeling out of there as fast as he could. The glare hitting the back of the weapon's head could have burned a hole through it, but 𝗏 would deal with verbal abuse later. If he could get to Sid and Naga's house, they would be able to stitch Maka up before she lost too much blood. But then again, if they'd heard the explosion, they were bound to be headed towards the school. For now, it would be safest to take her back to the apartment. It took him less than 3 minutes to get home at the speed he was racing through town at. Some people were yelling at him as he swerved dangerously around tight corners, nearly clipping a few pedestrians. None of that mattered to him, not when his meister was bleeding out and still unconscious. The tires screeched once more as he slammed down on the brakes, the back of the bike lifting at nearly a 45-degree angle. It landed with a hard thud, jerking 𝗏 back a bit. Just as he was getting off, a large shadow flew overhead and a pop sounded moments later as Blair landed with her cat reflexes next to 𝗏. "𝗏, what's going on?" There was an explosion. Blair turned her large cat eyes to the meister lying motionless in his arms. "Maka, does this have to do with that large explosion a few minutes ago?" "Good timing, I'll need you to help clean her off in the shower. Kid and Black Star are handling a witch at the school. I'll fill you in more once we take care of Maka." "Right. You children really don't learn, do you?" Ametrine drawled as she effortlessly blocked every attack that was thrown at her. "I'm about to draw a sweat, this is so hard, and it took me so long to do my makeup this morning in anticipation of this visit." Black Star struck as fast and hard as he could, aiming for every weak point all over her body. Tsubaki had even transformed into Shadow Star's Zeroth form, 𝗵𝗲, but the witch was still untouched. It only drove the ninja harder as his weapon became a blur in the flurry of attacks. "We'll keep going until we drop dead or you're defeated. From my perspective, it'll be the latter of the two options." Kid shot back as he provided ground support for Black Star. It was difficult to lock on with the speed he was moving. "I'm afraid you don't get to come into my city, my school, attack my friend, and expect to just walk away. You've pissed off the wrong Shinigami, which Ametrine." Ametrine let out a chuckle as she lifted her palm outwards as Black Star neared. A condensed beam shot from her hand towards the ninja, a lethal blow if it landed. With a split-second margin of error, he dodged it before flashing behind her and swinging down his katana full force. Locks of fire-red hair shot up and knocked him away, his body slamming into another crumbling wall of the school. Kid felt the familiar sensation of the Sanzu lines beginning to release. The wind began picking up, swirling violently around the area as it turned into a twister. "Playtime is over, little boys, time to go to sleep." Ametrine shot both hands out to the side, mouthing an enchantment as wind picked up around her. "I'm done being nice. Now the whole city can suffer for your ill manners." The two forces of the wind collided together, energy dangerously sparking between them as the force grew stronger. As loose dirt began to lift, the wind propelled them into small missiles scattering in any direction. A small rock nicked Kid on the face, but he paid no heed as the second and third Sanzu lines glowed with power, his own swirling energy pushing Ametrine's back as it grew. The witch forced more of her wavelength out to compete with the Shinigami's level, the vortex growing enormous and out of control. "If that thing gets any bigger, it'll destroy the whole school and more than half the city." Stein appeared out of nowhere next to Kid, his eyes locked onto the witch rising to the sky. "We need a way to get her out of Death City and fast. Spirit and I will work on pushing her back. Keep your attacks narrowed to avoid collateral." "I may not be that young boy anymore, Professor Stein, but somehow I'm still being guided by you." Kid joked roughly as Ametrine's soul grew larger once more, nearly surpassing the Shinigami's released wavelength. "Someone's gotta keep you monsters in line. May as well be a monster itself to do the job." Stein shot back with a crazed smile as he swung Spirit around to rest along the length of his arm. Maka's father appeared in the face of the blade, expression nearly murderous yet collected. "She's going to pay for hurting my Maka. Enough of the talking, start kicking her ass." Black Star shouted over the howling winds. There was only one thing left to do since all other attacks failed. It was risky without Maka mediating the uncontrollable power. "Kid, you feelin' a little mad?" "More than a little, Black Star. Let's go madness." A ripple shot through the air and Kid faltered as time seemed to drawl. Black Star's dizzying fast shadow movements were slowed down to about the pace of a fast snail before freezing. Stein was moving no faster, In the process of swinging spirit from his arm to his front, the side's blade materializing as it moved. The wind kicking up pounds of dirt and debris remained stoic in the air. Kid eyed the scene with confusion, slowly lowering the guns. What? Time slowed down. No, it stopped. The Reaper muttered to himself as everything around him became trapped in a space bubble. So why wasn't he frozen? Because he was Shinigami? 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏. Came a familiar chirp from behind, and Kid turned to see the 𝗵𝗃𝗏 and her feline-resembling assistant standing there. 𝗵𝗃𝗏, you stopped time? Kid balked as he tried to wrap his head around what was happening. Never before had he seen the full effects of a powerful spell. Stopping time itself was a feat only for the strongest of witches, albeit it raised the question of whether or not it would affect the rest of the time stream. Be grateful she arrived in the nick of time. The second witch huffed out, taking a drag from her pipe, then blowing it out through slightly parted lips. If you had continued your battle with 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏, then your entire city and its people would have been wiped from this earth. She is a sneaky, conniving snake of a woman who has long been banished from the coven for abuse of her powers onto others and countless innocent souls collected. She's really that powerful, huh? Now it seemed more like divine intervention that Maka survived a solo battle against her, without a weapon no less. Not without injury, and she was still recovering from the fractured ribs due to the incident in Russia. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏. Maba chirped again as her right eye began to shine, emitting a blinding flash of light that covered the entire city. Kid slammed an arm over his eyes, still seeing the light force its way through skin and bone. An immense heat followed, causing him to instantly break out in a sweat. After a few intense moments, a loud crack echoed in the silence of frozen time, and with wariness, he lowered his arm to take a look. Massive lines of incantations were spewing from beneath Maba's cloak and wrapping themselves around a still 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏 before tightening down hard. Her form began to move sluggishly through a pocket of space, and the witch soon found herself bound together on the ground in front of the current mother of the coven. 𝗵𝗃𝗏, I should have known you'd pull a stunt like this, aiding the Reaper just before his demise. What a shame. You've fallen so far since having that lovey eye of yours ripped from your skull. 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏 spat at her sister witch, venom oozing from every word as she tried to wriggle around in the constraints. Silence, you wench. You are privileged to even still be alive after your crimes against the coven, so I suggest you hold your tongue lest I burn it off slowly with fire slugs. The second witch snarled back with just as much, if not more, venom. Reaper, you are now indebted to us. Remember it well. We shall handle her from here. I graciously thank you, 𝗵𝗃𝗏, for coming to the aid of my city and its inhabitants. Call upon me whenever you wish for your debt to be repaid. Kid crossed his right arm over his chest and bowed to the mother, grateful for the saving grace. Without the intervention, it was going to be a swift death for thousands. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗏. Just you wait, Reaper. I'll be out of there soon enough. Maka Alburn, I'll be back for her soul. 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏 screamed prior to a band of incantations slapping over her mouth. They vanished in a cloud of smoke just as time began to turn once more, the gray haze melting into colorful surroundings. Black Star, who was in the middle of a shadow star after image jutsu, stopped midair as soon as he realized the witch was gone. The images absorbed back into his body as he floated to the ground, rubbing a hand against his head in confusion. Stein, who was mid-swing with his scythe, stopped abruptly and placed the end of the weapon to the ground, knowing eyes darting to Kid as he pulled out a cigarette. What the fuck just happened? The ninja quickly looked around the area, searching for the witch he was battling just a moment ago. Where did she go? Did she get away? Damn it. I wasn't done fighting you. Seems we have a very good ally, Stein casually remarked, adjusting his glasses. Kid nodded as the Thompson sisters returned to human form. This is going to lead to bigger things. Not just for Death City, but all of you. I get the feeling they won't be able to hold her for very long with that level of strength. Agreed. Kid felt a trickle of dread slide down his spine. He had the feeling another full war was going to break out in the near future. But for now, he had a school to repair and a meister to check up on. They would deal with the war when it loomed on the horizon. Father, guide and protect us on the path of fate we are about to partake. _B_. Tremors were no longer shaking the city as Soul peered out from the kitchen window. Blair had taken Maka to get cleaned up, and while in the process of drying her off, the meister awoke. She was confused at first, wondering how she got back to the apartment in the first place, though the gears of her mind soon aligned and she became pissed. 𝗏 had bandaged her up the best he could, all the while scolding her for being a reckless idiot. For the past 5 minutes, though, the meister had been ranting and raving from the couch about how that which would have been punched harder had there been the chance. Even while 𝗏 set a steaming cup of tea down in front of her, Maka was still going on her rant, punching a pillow with renewed vigor. I should have known something was up with that girl. How she was always stalking you, glaring at me whenever she noticed us together. Gah, thinking about it makes me want to. 𝗏 grabbed her cheeks and pushed them together, earning a softened glare from his meister. He kept messing with her face until she gave in and went quiet, a sigh of resignation slipping out. Will you chill out? You just survived going against probably the strongest witch alive alone, and all you want to complain about is how you didn't get to punch her harder. I can't leave you alone for a second. 𝗏 sighed as he released her face before plopping down heavily next to her, letting his head drop back as he closed his eyes. I shouldn't have left you alone. You wouldn't be like this if I had just stayed there. Maka stayed quiet for a few minutes, playing with the hem of the oversized sweatshirt Blair had given her. He felt guilty about being dragged away, probably because of how she was treating him poorly over something that neither had control of. Tears welled up in her eyes and her heart ached. She never should have acted so childish, pushing him away because of a small interruption. Just as she lifted her head to speak, she noticed his white shirt was stained heavily with blood. 𝗏, did you get injured? Why is your shirt soaked in blood? The weapon opened his eyes and looked down, remembering it was soiled from his fall. Oh yeah, no big deal, a few scratches here and there. My jacket took most of the damage, so don't worry. He gave her a tired, toothy smile and ruffled her damp hair gently. She merely puffed her cheeks up in slight annoyance. Your wounds don't look so bad after getting cleaned up. You want something to eat? Not sure what we got, haven't been to the store lately. Take your shirt off and let me look at the wounds. Maka spoke quietly as she slowly got up from her spot, wincing and grabbing her shoulder gently as she opened the heavily utilized medical kit once more. Supplies were going to need refilled soon at the rate they were using them. A lot of their monthly spending was on the trusty first aid kit. Maka, I'm fine. You're the one who needs to sit down and rest. Seriously, they're just some scrapes. They'll heal in no time with the black blood. 𝗏 tried to argue, but just received a pointed look before sighing and giving in. Maka's mind was made up. Pulling his torn and bloodied shirt off, the weapon shifted to sit sideways on the furniture, feeling the cushions sink behind him as Maka kneeled down. He waited patiently while she slowly worked, hissing every now and then when she rubbed alcohol over the wounds. Her soul was stable for the most part, but it seemed to be trembling a little while she moved around. He reached his out in comfort, and she hesitated before taking it, the two souls resonating in harmony. All the worry, anger, fear, regret, and guilt flowed into him, and the weapon felt it all hit him square in the chest. Maka tightened the last of the bandages around 𝗏's arm, her fingers lingering lightly over the wound. She felt awful that he'd gotten hurt again because of her recklessness. If she hadn't gotten so upset over something so small, something so stupid. Without her realizing it, 𝗏 had pulled away and shifted on the couch, so he was facing her, arms pulling the petite woman against his bare chest. Maka didn't fight it, only shifting to readjust for more comfort. His chin rested atop the still slightly damp sandy locks. It's not your fault, so stop blaming yourself for it. If anything, it's my fault for leaving you alone like that. I'm sorry. 𝗏. It'll be all right. Just let it all out. Maka felt the tears overflowing as she wrapped her arms around 𝗏, sobbing into his shoulder as the emotional dam she had built up suddenly burst wide open. Everything she held in for the past week flowed out as she cried into her partner's shoulder, the heavy weight lifting from her chest. 𝗏 kept silent while she cried, rubbing his hand rhythmically up and down her bandaged back. He knew she needed the release just from how tense her shoulders had become. Even her soul felt lighter the longer the emotions spilled out. The two sat there for nearly an hour, just holding each other in silence. Maka's face felt like a giant marshmallow as she used the back of her hands to wipe any remaining tears away, emerald eyes red and stinging. Pulling back, she noticed 𝗏 had his eyes closed, his mouth slightly open as he slumped against the back of the couch. He'd fallen asleep sometime during her outburst, his arms still tightly wrapped around her. Maka stared at his peaceful form. With a delicate finger, she traced his jawline, his cheek, down to his lips that were just barely parted. How could he always be so calm and collected while she was, well, reckless and strong-headed would be the best way to describe it. The man in front of her had always been her support, her friend, partner. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if they were something more. But how would that affect things? Her mother and father couldn't even last despite being a power couple, and their soul compatibility was unmatched. Would that happen if things went a step further over the looming line? Maka gently cupped a bandaged hand against his cheek as she leaned towards him, licking her lips tentatively as she angled her head slightly to line their lips up. But if she didn't take the chance now, would she ever? Was this the moment 𝗧𝗵𝗲 talked about? Eyelids fluttered down the rest of the way as their lips were nearly touching, heart pounding hard against her chest. Just as she stopped shy in reconsideration, movement threw her off guard as his lips pressed back against hers and a hand gently pressed against the back of her neck. Her face flushed brightly as she jerked away, slapping a hand over her mouth as she stared at Seoul with wide eyes. Maka 𝗧𝗵𝗲, did you just kiss me while I was sleeping? Such a pervert. Seoul teased with a toothy grin as he watched Maka go from embarrassed to mock-annoyed, her face bright red. I think Blair's becoming a bad influence on you with all those scandalous clothes she wears. I never took you for the type. 𝗧𝗪𝗡. Seoul snatched her hand away before silencing her with another kiss, keeping her hand locked in his. The meister gave in after a few apprehensive moments and relaxed against the new unfamiliar sensation, running her free hand into wild white locks. Seoul took that as an invitation as he wrapped his free arm tighter around her waist, pulling her into a straddle position on his lap and flush against his chest. She could feel that toothy grin against her lips, and she couldn't help but smile back. What had she been so worried about?